Beneath the grandeur of the Vatican, beyond the towering colonnades, the sacred relics, and the whispers of centuries-old prayers, lies a world hidden from even the most faithful eyes. A world of sealed archives, cryptic manuscripts, and secrets buried so deep they've never seen daylight. For over 2,000 years, the Vatican has stood not only as a beacon of faith, but as a fortress of mystery. Why are some documents locked away for centuries, their contents known to only a select few? What truths lie behind the rumours of hidden chambers, lost prophecies, and relics said to possess unearthly powers? This isn't fiction. These are real questions left unanswered by the most secretive institution on Earth. In this journey, we're peeling back the velvet curtain, exploring the shadows cast by history, power, and the unknown. So, sit back, relax, and let's dive into the most chilling, curious, and captivating mysteries the Vatican has never fully explained. What you discover might change how you see history forever. Tucked behind the mighty walls of Vatican City, beneath the gaze of ancient saints and marbled angels, lies a place few have ever entered, and even fewer have truly understood. The sunlit courtyards and golden chapels of St. Peter's Basilica may speak of divine beauty and open faith, but the Apostolic Archive, formerly known as the Archivum Secretum Vaticanum, offers no such transparency. Its name alone conjures images of forbidden knowledge and sealed truths. The doors to this archive are heavy, centuries-old portals of thick wood and iron that guard over 50 meters of shelving within. The temperature is carefully regulated. The air is still nearly silent. Dust is kept at bay with an almost sacred diligence. Illuminated only by soft indirect light, the corridors stretch on like the veins of time itself, lined with manuscripts, letters, and parchments older than many modern nations. Among these countless volumes are handwritten notes from medieval popes, correspondence with emperors and kings, transcripts of trials, decrees, and codices. The records of Galileo's Inquisition trial, the papal bulls that shaped empires, the letters of Mary, Queen of Scots, as she awaited her execution. These are not fables. They are facts, tangible pieces of our world's most powerful and turbulent moments preserved under lock and key. Access to the archive is not impossible, but it is far from easy. Only qualified scholars with precise topics of research are granted entry. They are permitted to request limited documents under supervision and must justify their every inquiry. No browsing, no photography, and certainly no straying into the sealed vaults. Those sections of the archive still closed to any outside eye. So what then lies beyond those restricted doors? It is here that speculation begins to stir. Some believe the Vatican possesses writings long thought lost, texts that could reshape the foundations of Christianity itself. Among the more persistent theories is the existence of apocryphal Gospels, those rejected from the canonical Bible at the Council of Nicea. Could the Gospel of Mary Magdalene or the Gospel of Judas reside here in their original form? Could they offer a radically different version of events, a different voice in the story of Jesus? Officially, no such documents have been acknowledged, and yet whispers persist. Others point to letters and edicts concerning early heresies, tales of sects that diverge too far from Roman doctrine, wiped from history by fire and decree. Could these lost doctrines preserved in secret suggest a more complex tapestry of early belief than the one taught today? Then there are the more esoteric claims of prophecies locked away, of evidence concerning Marian apparitions never revealed to the public. Some fringe theorists speak of the Vatican holding records of supernatural phenomena or even contact with otherworldly beings. These ideas veer into the fantastical, but they reflect a deeper truth. The very act of concealment breeds curiosity. In the absence of answers, imagination thrives. Even among more grounded scholars, there is curiosity about historical anomalies. Rumours suggest the archive might hold documentation about lost civilizations, ancient technologies, or the true nature of certain biblical miracles, explanations that were deemed too dangerous or disruptive to be made public. Could there be information about the missing years of Jesus' life? Could there be detailed accounts of ancient rituals preserved by early church fathers, then quietly hidden away? But perhaps the greatest mystery is not what is hidden, but why it must be hidden. The Church insists the archive's secrecy is not about suppression, but stewardship. The contents, they argue, are too fragile, too sacred, too important to be exposed to misuse. Some documents, they say, involve sensitive diplomatic information or matters of personal confession or fragile theological debates from centuries ago. And perhaps that is true, yet the timeline of release often seems selective. Why, for example, were certain documents concerning World War II only opened after intense public pressure? Why are entire centuries of correspondence still unavailable when historians around the world seek only to understand? In a world increasingly shaped by transparency, the Vatican Archive remains a monument to mystery. Its halls are real, its shelves are full, but its heart, those silent sealed sections untouched by modern eyes, remains a puzzle carved into time, and so we are left to wonder what truths lie just beyond the reach of history. What pages have never been turned? What voices never heard? Is the archive a vault of the past or a mirror held up to the very nature of power, knowledge, and faith? Perhaps somewhere in that labyrinth of parchment and parchment, behind a nondescript door and a quiet hallway, the answer waits, unchanged, unread, and hidden still. And that is where our exploration leads next. As we step away from the shadowed corridors of the Vatican Secret Archives, where forgotten truths slumber behind locked doors, our path now leads us far beyond Rome into the rolling hills of central Portugal. There, nestled between olive groves and quiet pastures, lies a small town with a name now etched into history and mystery alike: Fatima. The air in Fatima is still and heavy with reverence. Pilgrims gather beneath the open sky, their whispers rising like incense around the grand basilica of Our Lady of the Rosary. But long before this place became a magnet for millions, it was just a patch of farmland, quiet, ordinary, unremarkable, until 1917. That year, 3 shepherd children, Lucia dos Santos and her cousins, Francisco and Hinta Mato, claimed to have seen a radiant figure in the Cova area, a field just outside town. The figure, they said, was a woman brighter than the sun, who identified herself as the Virgin Mary. Over the course of 6 apparitions, she revealed to the children 3 messages, later known as the 3 secrets of Fatima. The first 2 were eventually disclosed to the public. One described a vision of hell where lost souls writhed in agony. The second predicted the end of World War I, warned of a second, more devastating conflict, and called for the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Both messages, while extraordinary, could be placed within the context of Catholic prophecy and wartime anxiety. But the third secret was different. According to Sister Lucia, who became a Carmelite nun and remained the only surviving visionary, the Virgin Mary had instructed that the third secret not be revealed until 1960, or until the Church deemed the time was right. When asked why, Lucia reportedly replied, "Because it will be much clearer then." 1960 came, but the Vatican remained silent. Speculation swirled. What was so explosive, so destabilizing that even the Church hesitated to speak? For decades, the contents of the third secret were the subject of fevered debate within theological circles, among conspiracy theorists, and even within the Vatican itself. Some believed the secret predicted the assassination of a pope. Others thought it might contain dire warnings about the collapse of faith within the Church, or a cataclysmic event that would shake the very foundations of the modern world. There were rumours that multiple popes had read the message and wept. Some claimed that Pope John the Faustin XXIII, upon reading it in 1960, simply placed it back in its envelope and declared it would not be revealed during his pontificate. It wasn't until the year 2000, 40 years after the original deadline, that the Vatican finally released what it claimed was the full text of the third secret. The document, a handwritten page by Sister Lucia, described a symbolic vision. A bishop dressed in white climbing a mountain toward a cross, passing through a ruined city filled with corpses. Upon reaching the summit, he is shot and killed by soldiers. Angels gather the blood of the martyrs. The vision, the Vatican explained, had been fulfilled in the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. For some, this interpretation brought closure, but for many others, the mystery only deepened. Was the text truly complete? Sister Lucia's original description of the third secret reportedly spanned multiple pages, yet the version published by the Vatican was strikingly brief. And while the vision was undeniably powerful, it lacked the specificity and direct language of the first 2 secrets. There was no mention of the Virgin Mary, no explicit message or instruction, only symbolic imagery open to interpretation. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who later became Pope Benedict XVI, had once hinted that the secret dealt with dangers to the faith itself, a theme not overtly present in the 2000 version. Even more curiously, some Vatican insiders, including Archbishop Loris Capovilla, who served as secretary to Pope John XXIII, have suggested there may have been more than one document, raising the possibility that what was released was not the entire message. These discrepancies have fueled speculation ever since. Could the real Third Secret warn of a future apostasy within the Church? An erosion of belief not from without but from within? Could it contain prophecies so stark, so unsettling, that successive popes feared the consequences of disclosure? Some believe it may foretell events still to come: global war, environmental collapse, or even a profound crisis of conscience at the heart of Catholicism. And yet, there is no proof, only fragments, only shadows. The Vatican maintains that the full secret has been released and that the interpretation lies in the eye of the faithful. Sister Lucia, before her death in 2005, reportedly affirmed the published vision as authentic, but skeptics question whether she was free to speak openly or whether the original letter still lies sealed in a hidden drawer. Perhaps in a place like Fodima, where visions pierce the veil between heaven and earth, truth is not meant to be plain. Perhaps prophecy resists clarity by its nature, inviting reflection more than revelation. Or perhaps the full message remains hidden, resting quietly somewhere in the apostolic archive behind a door that may never open. So, we are left to wonder, was the third secret truly revealed? Or does the real message still lie in silence, waiting for a world willing or desperate enough to hear it? As the whispers surrounding the third secret of Fatima dissolve into the deeper currents of Vatican mystery, we turn now toward one of the strangest and most debated claims ever associated with the Holy See. It is a tale that sounds more like the plot of a science fiction novel than anything one might expect from the Vatican's inner sanctum. And yet, the story comes not from fiction, but from a Benedictine monk. They called it the chronovisor. No photographs exist of the device, no blueprints, no surviving fragments, and yet its alleged existence continues to stir curiosity. According to the accounts of Father Pelgro Ernetti, a respected Italian priest, exorcist and musicologist, the chronovisor was a machine capable of doing the impossible, observing events from the past, not through memory, not through reading or speculation, but through sight. Ernetti first spoke of the device publicly in the 1960s, claiming it had been developed in secret by a team of scientists inside the Vatican. Among them, he said, were top European physicists, including Enrico Fermi, one of the fathers of the atomic age, and Werner von Braun, the German rocket engineer later instrumental in NASA's space program. The machine, according to Ernetti, resembled a kind of cabinet with a viewing screen, control buttons, an antenna made of rare metals. It functioned, he claimed, by capturing residual electromagnetic radiation left behind by all matter. Every sound, every movement, every word spoken in the past had, in theory, left an energetic imprint on the universe, one that could be accessed and reconstructed. The chronovisor, he said, could lock onto those frequencies, tune into the past like a television tunes into a channel, and display the recorded echo of history. Ernetti described viewing scenes from ancient Rome. He claimed to have seen the philosopher Cicero deliver a speech. He claimed to have watched the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Most remarkably, he said he had seen and even photographed the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. In 1972, an image surfaced, supposedly taken from the chronovisor. It showed the face of a suffering man, eyes upturned, crowned with thorns. Ernetti insisted it was Christ, but skeptics quickly pointed out that the image bore a striking resemblance to a known statue in an Italian church. The photograph was dismissed as a hoax by many, but the questions refused to die. Was the chronovisor a fabrication, a parable, or could there be a sliver of truth behind the story? Father Ernetti himself was no mere eccentric. He was a scholar well versed in Gregorian chant and ancient literature. He worked with the Vatican's exorcism office and contributed to academic journals. To many who knew him, he was a man of integrity and discipline. But toward the end of his life, doubt began to creep in. A letter allegedly written by Ernetti shortly before his death in 1994 retracted the entire story, but the authenticity of that letter remains disputed. Others claim that in private Ernetti stood by his claims to the very end. The Vatican, for its part, has never confirmed the existence of such a device, nor has it ever categorically denied it. In fact, following the publication of Ernetti's story, the Vatican issued a curious statement, a warning that anyone using an instrument of such characteristics would be excommunicated. A strange comment for a machine that supposedly didn't exist. This silence, strategic or otherwise, has only fueled further speculation. Could the chronovisor, if real, explain the Vatican's extraordinary interest in time, history and prophecy? Might such a device, even in partial form, be stored within the apostolic archive, hidden from the world, not because it doesn't work, but because it does? Some theorists suggest the chronovisor may have been dismantled not out of failure, but fear. Fear of the consequences of witnessing unfiltered truth. What would happen if humanity could watch any moment in time? What truths would be confirmed or denied? Would it destroy faith or rewrite it? Would governments try to seize the technology? Could it be weaponized not as a tool of destruction, but of control? Others posit a more symbolic interpretation. Perhaps the chronovisor was never a machine in the literal sense, but a metaphor, a spiritual lens, a mystical concept made concrete for a modern age. After all, many religions speak of divine omniscience, of records kept in heaven, of judgment rendered based on perfect knowledge. Could Ernetti's account be a cloaked reference to such a divine mechanism, translated into the language of science? And yet, what if the story is not a metaphor at all? What if, deep within the Vatican's labyrinthine vaults, beyond the reach of public view, there rests a forgotten machine, gathering dust in silence, its screen dark, its secrets undisturbed? A relic of ambition, perhaps, or a tool still waiting to be used. As with many Vatican mysteries, the lines between fact and fiction blur under layers of secrecy. But the very persistence of this story, its refusal to disappear, suggests it touches something deeper, a longing to know what has been lost, to witness what no longer is, to lift the veil of time itself. So, we are left with the question, was the chronovisor real? If it was, where is it now? And if it wasn't, why does the idea still haunt us? From the shadow of speculative devices and the fog of time-twisting secrets, we step into something far more recent and far more personal. A story not carved into parchment or sealed in a vault, but etched into the lives of a grieving family and the heart of a city that still whispers her name. Rome, June 1983. The summer air is thick and restless. Street vendors call out near the Castel Sant'Angelo and the golden dome of St. Peter's Basilica. Peter's Basilica gleams in the evening light. In a quiet Vatican-owned apartment just steps away from the heart of Catholicism, a 15-year-old girl finishes her flute lesson. Her name is Emanuela Orlandi. She gathers her sheet music, makes a brief phone call to her sister, and steps out into the Roman streets. She's never seen again. Emanuela was not just any teenager. She was a Vatican citizen, one of the very few lay people officially residing within the walls of the tiny sovereign state. Her father worked as a clerk for the prefecture of the papal household. Her life was sheltered, deeply intertwined with the rhythms and rituals of Vatican life. And yet, on that quiet June evening, she vanished without a trace. What followed was a case unlike any other in Italian history. A disappearance that would entangle not only local police, but the Vatican, the Italian government, foreign operatives, organised crime, and journalists across decades. A case that continues to this day to elude explanation. Initially, police treated it as a routine missing person case. Perhaps Emanuela had run away, perhaps it was a kidnapping. But quickly, inconsistencies emerged. Friends reported seeing her near a bus stop, speaking to a man in a dark BMW, who had offered her a job handing out flyers. Others said she appeared agitated that day, as if something had disturbed her. Then came the phone calls. Anonymous men called the Orlandi home, claiming to have kidnapped Emanuela. They demanded the release of Mettielli, aka the man imprisoned for attempting to assassinate Pope John Paul VII just 2 years prior. The theory was shocking that Emanuela Orlandi had been taken as leverage by a group calling itself the Grey Wolves, a Turkish ultrist organisation. Was this a simple criminal act or a calculated political move with international dimensions? But just as suddenly as the calls began, they stopped. No proof of life, no further demands, and no leads that could be substantiated. Years passed. Then more threads appeared, and with them more questions. One Vatican insider suggested that high-ranking clergy knew more than they were admitting. An Italian mobster's mistress later alleged that Emanuela had been abducted on orders from the Band di Alana, a powerful Roman crime syndicate. She claimed the girl was used to pressure the Vatican into repaying a massive debt. Her body, she said, had been buried in the foundations of a church. That church, Sant'Apollinare, became a focal point. In 2005, a tomb was opened in connection with the case. Inside, the remains of a notorious gangster, Enrico Dietis, were found buried in a spot normally reserved for clerics, but no trace of Emanuela. Still, the theories persisted. Some suggested she had been pulled into a clandestine circle within the Vatican itself. Others spoke of secret tapes, of silenced witnesses, of doses that vanished or were never written down at all. In 2012, the Vatican even reopened an internal investigation decades after claiming it had no jurisdiction or knowledge of the affair. In 2019, responding to a letter from the Orlandi family, the Vatican authorized the opening of 2 sealed tombs in the Teutonic Cemetery, an exclusive burial site behind St. Peter's Basilica, Peter's Basilica. The tombs, marked with angelic sculptures and Latin inscriptions, were said to contain the remains of 2 19th century princesses. But when investigators opened them, they found nothing. No bones, no remains at all. The tombs were empty. That revelation, haunting and unexpected, only deepened the sense that something was being concealed. Why were the tombs disturbed? Where had the remains gone? And more pressingly, had Emanuela ever been there at all? The Vatican has repeatedly denied knowledge or involvement, and yet for 4 decades, answers have remained elusive. Every few years, a new statement, a new lead, a new document, often promising clarity, only leaves more questions in its wake. Was this a crime of political manipulation? A case of organised crime exploiting the Church's vulnerabilities, or something darker, buried deeper, involving actors within the Vatican itself? The Orlando family, led with relentless resolve by Emanuela's brother Petro, has never stopped searching. Not for justice, not even for closure, just for the truth. And the world continues to ask, how does a girl disappear from the heart of the world's most guarded city-state, surrounded by security, protocol, and spiritual authority, without a single witness, a single image, or a single confession? Perhaps the truth lies not in what we see, but in what remains carefully obscured. Perhaps somewhere within a locked drawer or a sealed corridor, the answer waits, untouched by time. And so we ask again, what really happened to Emanuela Orlandi? And why, after 40 years, does the Vatican still hesitate to say? As the story of Emanuela Orlandi continues to echo through the corridors of power and silence, we turn now to a mystery that stretches not just across decades, but centuries. A mystery that claims to foresee the very future of the Catholic Church and perhaps its end. Tucked within a tattered 16th century manuscript, yellowed by time and worn at the edges, lies a prophecy that has haunted popes, puzzled historians, and stirred quiet unease within the halls of the Vatican. It is known as the Prophecy of the Popes, a list of cryptic mottos said to predict every pope from the 12th century to the last one the world will ever know. The prophecy is attributed to St. Malachy, a 12th century Irish archbishop known for his piety and visions. According to tradition, during a pilgrimage to Rome in the year 1139, Malachy was struck by a powerful vision. One of 13 Latin phrases, each one describing a future pontiff. He's said to have written the list and presented it to Pope Innocent II, where it vanished into the Vatican's archives until it was rediscovered in 1590, more than 450 years later. From the start, the prophecy has been surrounded by questions. Why did it remain hidden for centuries? Why was it revealed at that precise moment during a contested papal election? And who truly wrote it? The mottos themselves are brief, sometimes only 2 or 3 words. Yet for those inclined to believe, they seem to contain uncanny relevance. Consider De Meditate Lunae from the half moon, which was assigned to Pope John Paul V, who was born during a half moon, elected during a half moon, and died just 33 days later. Again during a half moon, or pastor at Natter Shepherd and Sailor for Pope John. 23rd, a former patriarch of Venice, a city defined by water, and a man often called the shepherd of the modern world, coincidence, imagination, or something else. Skeptics argue that the earlier mods covering popes before the Prophecies publication in 1590 are too accurate to be anything but written after the fact, carefully constructed to match historical figures. The later ones, they say, are vague enough to fit almost anyone, and yet even within those ambiguities strange alignments persist. Then we come to the final entry in persecution, Extrema Sedit, Petrus Romanus. In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church there will be Peter the Roman, who will feed his flock amid many tribulations, after which the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. The end, a chilling conclusion. This final pope, Petrus Romanus, is not numbered like the others. The list seems to break its own rhythm, as if stepping out of time, and many believers have noted with unease that Pope Francis is the 266th pope, and depending on how one counts, potentially the 112th pope from Malachi's vision. The one who follows Benedict, 216th, the second to last on the list. But Francis is not named Peter, nor is he Roman by birth. Yet some have pointed to his chosen name, Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi, who was born Giovanni Dimitro de Bernardone, John, son of Peter. And though Francis is Argentinian, his parents were Italian immigrants, making him in a poetic sense Peter the Roman. Could this be a stretch? Perhaps. But in the context of prophecy, interpretation often walks the line between poetry and belief. Still, what truly unsettles is not the name, but the imagery. The final persecution, the destruction of Rome, the last judgment. What could it mean? Is the prophecy literal, foretelling an apocalyptic end to the church or to the world itself? Or is it metaphorical, a vision of spiritual crisis, internal collapse, or the fading of influence in a modern age? The Vatican has never officially recognised the prophecy, but neither has it condemned it outright. It remains in a strange liminal space, unspoken, yet deeply present. In 2005, Cardinal Ratzinger, before becoming Pope Benedict XVI, was asked about the prophecy during an interview. He simply smiled and said, "I take it with a grain of salt." And yet, those who work closest to the heart of the Church know that silence can sometimes say more than speech. Throughout history, prophecies have always hovered at the edge of faith, both a source of hope and a vessel for fear. The prophecy of the popes is no exception. Its cryptic lines offer no dates, no certainties, only fragments and shadows. Yet, it remains one of the most compelling and unsettling mysteries to ever orbit the papal throne. Perhaps St. Malach saw something through divine vision or deep intuition about the cyclical rise and fall of institutions, or perhaps the list is a clever forgery born from political ambition and sustained by centuries of coincidence. But either way, it endures, and so we ask, are we living under the reign of the final pope? Is the Church approaching the end of an age foretold nearly 900 years ago? Or are we simply projecting meaning onto ancient lines, hoping to understand a future that remains as ever hidden from view? As the final words of the prophecy of the popes linger in the air, warning of tribulation and judgment, we descend once more into the shadows of history where belief, power, and secrecy intersect. This next chapter is not prophecy. It is a documented network of actions and absences, a series of corridors, real and political, through which some of the darkest figures of the 20th century are said to have slipped quietly, invisibly. They are known as the rat lines, a term coined after World War II to describe the secret escape routes used by high-ranking Nazi officials to flee Europe. Their destination, South America, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, countries with sympathetic regimes or weak extradition laws. But the real question, the one that continues to reverberate through the marble halls of Vatican City, is whether the Church helped them get there. At the centre of this story stands a single building, the Collegio Teutonico, a quiet, unassuming structure just steps from St. Peter's Basilica, tucked within Vatican territory and historically connected to the German-speaking Catholic world. It became, according to numerous reports, one of the key stations in the Ratline network, safe, sovereign, and immune from outside scrutiny. The mechanism was disturbingly efficient. Nazi war criminals, often under false identities, would find temporary refuge in church properties across Italy. From there, using Vatican-issued travel documents, so-called lease, they would obtain Red Cross passports, board ships from Genoa, and vanish into the southern hemisphere. Men like Adolf Eichermann, the architect of the Holocaust's logistics, Joseph Mengele, the infamous doctor of Avits, Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, all found their way along this invisible trail, but who facilitated it? One name appears repeatedly in the records: Bishop Alois Hudal, an Austrian cleric stationed in Rome. Hudal was rector of the Collegio Teutonico and an outspoken admirer of Hitler's early rise. After the war, he positioned himself as a spiritual protector of displaced Germans, but evidence suggests he went far beyond pastoral care. In his own memoirs, Hudal admitted to helping Nazis escape, believing it was his duty to offer them Christian compassion and protect them from what he called victor's justice. Still, Hudal was only one man. The scope of the rat line suggests a broader, more organised effort, an infrastructure that stretched from dances across Italy to the very heart of the Vatican bureaucracy. And it is here that the mystery deepens. Was this the work of individual priests acting on conscience? Or was there tacit approval from higher levels of the Church? Some historians argue that Pius XII, the wartime Pope, maintained a policy of silence that enabled such operations not out of sympathy for Nazism, but out of fear of communist expansion. In the chaotic aftermath of the war, with Soviet influence sweeping across Eastern Europe, former fascists were seen by some in the Church as a necessary bulwark against atheistic communism. Others believed the Church was manipulated, its vast charitable networks exploited by intelligence agencies like the CIA and MI6, which also helped certain former Nazis escape in exchange for scientific or political cooperation during the Cold War. And yet the lines remain blurred. Documents confirm that Vatican offices, including the Pontifical Commission for Assistance, issued identity papers later found in the possession of war criminals. The Red Cross has acknowledged that many of the passports it provided were based on Vatican referrals. But when asked, Vatican officials maintained that there was no centralised knowledge of these actions, that if such help was given, it was done at lower levels without papal approval. But the deeper question may not be whether the Church knew, but why so many involved remained silent. Why, even decades later, have requests for access to certain Vatican wartime records been delayed or denied? Why, despite growing evidence, has there been no official reckoning? In 2020, Pope Francis made a significant step, ordering the opening of the Vatican archives relating to the pontificate of Pius XII. Scholars hoped this would bring clarity, yet early reviews of the material suggest more questions than answers. Some documents are missing, others are cryptic, and many are deeply nuanced, hinting at internal conflict within the Church itself between those driven by ideology and those driven by conscience. There is no doubt that the post-war years were a time of chaos and uncertainty. Refugees flooded Europe, governments collapsed, lines between good and evil blurred in the fog of survival and strategy. But amid this turmoil, the role of the Church, a moral authority for over 1 billion souls, takes on a weight that cannot be ignored. Could a centuries-old institution built on faith have knowingly facilitated the escape of those who orchestrated the Holocaust? Or were these actions isolated and misguided, lost in the confusion of a world rebuilding from the ashes? And if the truth lies somewhere in between, buried in private letters, whispered in confessionals, or sealed in a drawer labelled classified, will it ever fully emerge? Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Ratline mystery is not what it reveals, but what it forces us to confront, that even within sacred walls morality can be contested, that even those sworn to higher ideals can falter when the world demands impossible choices. So we are left to wonder, how much did the Vatican know, and how much even now does it choose not to say from the tangled shadows of post-war escape routes and moral compromise? We now step into a different kind of darkness, one not born of politics or conflict, but something older, quieter, and more primal. A darkness said to move unseen, to possess, torment, and sometimes speak in tongues not heard for centuries. Inside a discreet office tucked within the walls of the Vatican, far from the ornate grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica and the echoing corridors of the Apostolic Palace, sat a man tasked with confronting that darkness. His name was Father Gabriel Amore, For over 30 years, he served as the Vatican's chief exorcist. His official title is Exorcista dell'Atto Droma, exorcist of the Diocese of Rome. But in the world of the faithful and the fearful, he came to be known by another name, the Pope's exorcist. Father Amor claimed to have performed tens of thousands of exorcisms over his lifetime. Each one, he said, involved spiritual discernment, prayer, and a deep battle between good and evil. He was not a fringe figure. He was ordained, respected, and most critically authorized. He studied under Father Candido Amantini, the previous exorcist of Rome, and operated with the full backing of church hierarchy, reporting directly to the Vatican. Yet the contents of his files, his diaries, reports, and testimonies remain largely hidden from public view. These records, stored in church archives and personal journals, have been the subject of intense speculation. What did they contain? Accounts of demonic possession, documentation of unexplainable phenomena, or something else entirely? Something the Vatican believed the world was not ready to see. Amorth himself gave occasional glimpses. In interviews and writings, he described cases of inexplicable strength, voices that spoke languages unknown to the possessed, and levitations witnessed by multiple clergy. He described one young woman whose voice dropped several octaves when the rite began, speaking Latin, though she had never studied it, and cursing the priest with intimate knowledge of his private sins. In another case, he spoke of a man who foamed at the mouth and screamed in ancient Aramaic when confronted with a consecrated host. The room, Amor claimed, turned ice cold. The crucifix on the wall rattled violently. The man required 6 people to restrain him. Skeptics argue that these are symptoms of mental illness, mass hysteria, or suggestive environments. Real experiences, yes, but explainable through psychology and stress-induced phenomena. The Church itself acknowledges this possibility. In fact, before any exorcism is approved, it requires medical and psychological evaluations to rule out natural causes. And yet some cases defy easy classification. Why, for instance, do certain individuals exhibit knowledge of obscure theological texts? How do they reveal information they could not have possibly known? Why do some physical manifestations seem to respond not to medicine, but to scripture? Amorth believed that possession was real, not metaphorical, not symbolic, but literal. He often warned that Satan's greatest triumph was convincing the world he didn't exist, and he criticized elements within the modern church for downplaying or even dismissing the reality of evil as a spiritual force. In 1999, the Vatican revised the official rite of exorcism, updating the language and making the process more rigorous. Some traditionalists, including Amorth, saw this as a dilution of centuries-old spiritual defense. Others viewed it as a necessary modernization, an effort to distinguish real cases from theatrical or delusional claims. Still, Amorth persisted. He kept detailed records of each exorcism, documenting names, behaviors, prayers used, and the results. Where are those records now? Some say they reside in the Vatican archives alongside thousands of other reports from daisies around the world. Others suggest that Amor kept many of his most troubling accounts private, locked away, entrusted only to those he believed would understand. And then there are the rumours that among these files are cases too disturbing to share. Reports of exorcisms gone wrong, accounts of possessions tied to ritual abuse or ancient heresies, even references, though always vague, to institutions or individuals said to be untouchable, protected by silence or by fear. One persistent theory suggests that some of these cases may have involved individuals close to the church itself, clergy members, even higher officials who had been invited in darkness through sin or occult practice. There is no proof, no confirmed names, but the very suggestion raises unsettling questions. What happens when evil does not come from outside but from within? Could that be why certain files remain sealed? Not because of what they reveal about demons, but because of what they might suggest about the Church's own vulnerability to corruption. In the final years of his life, Father Amor became more vocal. He warned of a great spiritual crisis brewing inside the Church. He believed the devil had not just infiltrated individuals, but institutions. In 2016, just months before his death, he stated that Satan rules the world and that the battle for souls had entered a new and dangerous phase. Was this the reflection of a man who had stared too long into the abyss? Or was it a final warning from someone who had spent decades on the front lines of the unexplained? Today, the Vatican continues to train exorcists. More than 250 of them serve around the world. But the full content of Amoth's exorcist files remains unreleased, guarded by the twin barriers of confidentiality and doctrine. So we are left to wonder what secrets lie within those reports. Are they relics of a fading belief system, or glimpses into forces we still barely understand? And if the Church truly holds evidence of battles between light and darkness, why is so much of it still hidden in silence? From the chilling accounts found in the Pope's exorcist files, where unseen forces challenge the boundaries of belief, we now turn to a relic that blurs the line between the physical and the miraculous, a cloth fragile with age yet heavy with mystery, revered by millions, doubted by many, and studied more than almost any other religious artifact in the world. It rests in a climate-controlled case within the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, folded with reverence, protected by bulletproof glass, guarded like a treasure of untold value. It is not adorned with gold or jewels, and yet what it may represent transcends empires. This is the Shroud of Tin. At first glance, it appears simple. A linen cloth roughly 14 ft long and 3.5 ft wide, worn and yellowed by time, bearing faint reddish stains and the ghostly image of a man. A front and back impression, as if the body had been wrapped in the fabric after death. The marks are subtle, barely visible from certain angles, but unmistakable once seen. A bearded face, closed eyes, arms crossed, wounds at the wrists and feet, bloodstains, lacerations, a gash in the side. Everything, it seems, is consistent with the Gospel accounts of the crucifixion. But here is the enigma. No one knows exactly how the image was formed. It is not painted. There are no pigments, no brush strokes, no chemical traces of ink or dye. The image sits only on the surface fibres, barely penetrating the weave. Its coloration is the result of subtle changes to the fabric cellulose. Some call it a photographic negative because when the image is reversed, its details become stunningly clear. The contours of the face, the depth of the wounds, the proportions of the body, as if the cloth somehow captured not only the shape of a man, but the very moment of death. The first recorded appearance of the shroud dates to the 14th century in France. From there, it passed through noble hands, survived fires, restorations and controversy, before arriving in tin in 1578. The Catholic Church does not officially claim it to be the burial cloth of Christ, but it has allowed it to be venerated as an object of deep spiritual significance. And yet, the questions remain. In 1988, a carbon dating test was conducted on a small piece of the cloth. The results, widely publicised, dated it to the years between 1260 and 1390. A medieval forgery, some concluded, a clever relic designed to inspire faith or consolidate power. But then complications emerged. Critics of the carbon dating pointed out that the tested sample came from a corner of the shroud, an area believed to have been damaged and repaired after a fire in 1532. Was the sample contaminated with newer material? Was it representative of the whole? Subsequent analyses introduced new layers of intrigue. Microscopic studies revealed traces of pollen, some of which come from plants found only in the Middle East. Soil particles on the cloth's fibres match those found in Jerusalem. Bloodstains, confirmed to be human, are classified as type A, a rare type in most populations but notably prevalent among Jewish communities in the region. And then there is the image itself. Modern imaging techniques have failed to replicate the exact process by which the shroud's image was formed. No medieval technology, no brush, no pigment, no scorching method recreates its complexity. In 1978, a team of American scientists under the Shroud of Tin Research Project (ST STIR) spent 5 days examining the cloth using X-rays, ultraviolet light, infrared thermography, and chemical analysis. In their final report, the image is not the product of an artist. Some theorists propose that a burst of radiant energy, light or heat, created the image at the moment of resurrection. Others suggest unknown natural phenomena involving decomposition, radiation, or static discharge. Fringe theories have even invoked quantum effects or multidimensional events, and yet all remain unproven. Could the shroud be the genuine burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth? A rare snapshot of history preserved in linen? Or is it a product of intense medieval devotion made not to deceive, but to inspire awe in a world desperate for tangible connection to the divine? The Church remains cautious. It neither declares the shroud authentic nor dismisses it as a forgery. Instead, it calls for continued study, both scientific and spiritual, and recognises the power the shroud holds over those who look upon it with faith, skepticism, or something in between. For even in the presence of unanswered questions, the shroud invites stillness. It confronts us with an image not of victory or power, but of vulnerability. A man broken, wrapped in silence. Whether sacred or symbolic, it demands our attention. And perhaps that is its true power, not in what it proves, but in what it stirs. So we are left to wonder, is this cloth a forgotten photograph of the divine, or an extraordinary riddle woven in faith and time? And if it is the latter, who left it behind, and why? From the faded image etched into ancient linen, possibly bearing witness to a moment lost in time, we now shift our gaze upward to the dark, silent expanse of the cosmos. But this next Vatican mystery is not buried beneath marble, nor hidden in the depths of an archive. It stands tall atop a remote mountain in Arizona, peering into the heavens, watching something. The location is Mount Graham, rising over 10,000 FT into the Arizona sky. It is a place of stillness, sacred to local indigenous tribes, steeped in ecological significance, and more recently cloaked in controversy. Here, above the clouds and far from the light pollution of modern cities, stands one of the world's most advanced astronomical observatories, and within it, a particular instrument has drawn more curiosity than most. Its name is LUCIFER, or more precisely, the Large Binocular Telescope Near Infrared Utility, with camera and integral field unit for extragalactic research. A long complex title condensed into a single word that has stirred speculation: Lucifer. Despite the acronym being later changed to LUI, perhaps to distance it from growing controversy, the original nickname lingers in popular memory, and with it the questions: why would a telescope associated with the Vatican, an institution historically wary of unorthodox knowledge, be named after the figure most commonly associated with rebellion and the fall from grace? Is it simply coincidence, a misstep in translation, or does it hint at something deeper? The Vatican Observatory, officially established in the 16th century and among the oldest astronomical institutions in the world, has long sought to reconcile science with faith. Today, its headquarters are in Castel Gandolfo, just outside Rome, but its research arm extends globally, including its partnership in the Mount Graham International Observatory. The Vatican's involvement here is real, though often misunderstood. The Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, VATI, a separate but nearby instrument, was installed on Mount Graham in the 1990s. While Lucy is operated primarily by a German consortium, its location within the same facility and its former name sparked a wave of theories connecting it to the Holy See, and the timing couldn't have been more evocative. At a moment when interest in exoplanets, deep space anomalies, and even the search for extraterrestrial life was accelerating, people began to ask, why is the Vatican so interested in the stars? Some Vatican astronomers have been candid in interviews. They speak of the philosophical implications of discovering life beyond Earth. Would it challenge doctrine? Would it alter our understanding of creation? Or would it, as some suggest, deepen the mystery of God's universe? Father José Gabriel Fess, former director of the Vatican Observatory, once stated that the existence of alien life doesn't contradict our faith. To the surprise of many, he went on to say that intelligent extraterrestrials would be considered part of God's creation, and if they sinned, they too could have their own relationship with the divine. But for some, these theological speculations raised further questions. Could the Vatican's scientific curiosity be driven by something more specific? Are they searching for signs, messages, movements, or phenomena that might tie into ancient texts or hidden knowledge? Could there be a celestial component to the prophecies or secrets long whispered about in Vatican corridors? Then there is the symbolism. The telescope dubbed Lucifer, peering into the cosmos from a mountain shrouded in spiritual and ecological controversy, used in part by the Church. It all feels too layered to be accidental. Some theorists point to biblical connections. Lucifer, the light bringer, once an angel cast down for seeking too much knowledge. Could the telescope's name be a nod to the eternal tension between faith and forbidden understanding? Others believe it's a red herring designed to distract, to obscure the true focus of such research. What if the Vatican isn't just looking for planets, but for patterns, cosmic alignments, ancient signals? There are even those who suggest the Church is watching for something predicted, something approaching. To be clear, there is no confirmed evidence that the Vatican Observatory is engaged in anything other than standard scientific research. No credible leaks, no classified missions. But the enduring mystery comes not from what is known, but from the gaps in between. Why here? Why is this mountain long opposed by indigenous groups and environmentalists? Why such a dramatic and symbolically charged name? Why does the Vatican, a city-state rooted in theology, invest so deeply in telescopes aimed at the outer edges of the universe? Perhaps in its own way, this search reflects the same impulse behind the Shroud of Tin or the Third Secret of Fatima, a longing to understand what lies just beyond the visible. Whether in relics of the past or stars of the future, the question is the same. What are we not seeing, so we are left to ponder? Is this simply a tool of astronomy, cold and clinical, or does the Lucifer telescope mark something more? An unspoken bridge between science and prophecy, between heaven and the abyss. And if the Vatican is looking outward with such intensity, what is it they hope to find? From the distant stars observed through telescopes perched on sacred mountains, we return now to the marble halls and cloistered chambers of the Vatican itself, where behind closed doors and beneath the surface of tradition, another layer of influence quietly operates. It is not a relic, nor a document, nor a celestial mystery. It is a man, or rather a title, known by few, seen by fewer, and yet whispered about in tones of both reverence and suspicion. They call him the Black Pope. To the uninitiated, the title might conjure images of secret rituals or shadowy conspiracies, but in official terms, the Black Pope is simply the Superior General of the Society of Jesus, the head of the Jesuit order. A position of immense spiritual responsibility, yes, but not at least outwardly a political one. And yet over centuries the role has gathered an aura of intrigue so dense that even today some believe this figure holds more power than the pontiff himself. The name Black Pope does not refer to any dark agenda. It comes from the simple black cassock traditionally worn by Jesuits in contrast to the white garments of the Pope. But the symbolism has proven difficult to contain. The Superior General is elected for life. He commands thousands of priests and scholars across every continent. He is accountable only to the Pope, yet some claim he has been known to advise, to influence, and in rare cases to steer the papacy from behind the scenes. The Society of Jesus was founded in 1540 by Ignatius of Loyola, a Basque nobleman turned mystic. From the beginning, the Jesuits were different. They vowed obedience not only to the Church but directly to the Pope. They focused on education, missions, and intellectual rigour, and they grew quickly. Within decades, Jesuit schools were shaping the minds of Europe's elite, and Jesuit missionaries were spreading Catholicism to the furthest reaches of the globe. But with influence came resistance. By the 18th century, the order had amassed such global reach culturally, financially, and politically that it faced backlash from monarchs and clergy alike. Accusations ranged from meddling in court affairs to manipulating colonial powers. In 1773, under pressure from secular rulers, Pope Clement XIV officially suppressed the Jesuits, dissolving the order, but they never truly vanished. By 1814, they were restored, and some say more carefully guarded than ever before. Since then, the Jesuits have continued to walk a line between service and power. Known for their discipline, discretion, and intellectual command, they have often been portrayed as the Vatican's strategic arm, the thinkers behind the throne. And that brings us to the present day. For the first time in history, the man in white, Pope Francis, is a Jesuit, a development that blurs the line between Pope and Black Pope more than ever before. Does this suggest a merging of spiritual authority and Jesuit philosophy? Or is it simply the result of a lifetime of service and humility rewarded by the College of Cardinals? Even before Francis, the role of the Superior General drew interest from conspiracy theorists and skeptics alike. Some point to the Jesuits' extensive network of schools and universities, noting their influence over generations of leaders. Others cite obscure documents suggesting that the Black Pope presides over a kind of shadow Vatican, not bound by public pronouncements or ceremony, but working quietly through diplomacy, persuasion, and precise timing. There are claims, unverified but persistent, that the Jesuits have held sway in matters ranging from elections of popes to geopolitical decisions, that they have used confessionals to gather intelligence, that they have infiltrated rival institutions to ensure the dominance of Rome's authority. Some even believe the Jesuit oath includes language of covert allegiance, though this too is widely disputed and often traced back to anti-Catholic propaganda from centuries past. But for all the speculation, the actual identity of the Black Pope is public. He is not hidden in the shadows. He speaks at press conferences, writes letters, and leads in accordance with the Church. Today, the Superior General is Father Arturo Sosa, a Venezuelan theologian and academic known for his thoughtful and global outlook. Yet, even he in interviews has acknowledged the burden of the myths that swirl around his office. Still, questions remain. What role does the Jesuit order truly play in Vatican decision-making? Are its leaders simply servants of the Church or silent architects of its long-term direction? And if there is influence, where is the line between guidance and control? Perhaps the mystery lies not in any one man, but in the structure itself. The Jesuits are trained not only in theology, but in logic, history, linguistics, and diplomacy. They are thinkers, planners, strategists, and they operate with a discipline and cohesion that few other religious orders can match. In a world increasingly shaped by ideology, power struggles, and rapid change, perhaps the idea of a Black Pope endures because it offers a counterpoint, a figure not ruled by charisma or visibility, but by intellect, silence, and strategy. So we are left to wonder, is the Black Pope merely a misunderstood title, an echo of historical tension, or is he something more, a quiet force moving behind the veil of papal white, shaping the Church in ways the public may never fully grasp? From the elusive authority of the Jesuit Superior General, the so-called Black Pope, we now move deeper into the heart of the Vatican's silent intellect, a place neither governed by doctrine nor ruled by ritual, but by something far older and more enduring, the written word. Here, in hushed corridors and temperature-controlled vaults, lies one of the greatest collections of human knowledge ever assembled. But within its silence are gaps, disappearances, shadows between the shelves. This is the Vatican Apostolic Library, and among its most intriguing secrets are the books it no longer holds. To walk through the Vatican Library is to enter another world. Soft light filters through high-arched windows, ancient wooden shelves creak under the weight of time, manuscripts bound in calfskin and illuminated with gold leaf rest beneath glass. Their pages were handwritten by monks who lived and died before printing presses existed. Some volumes are chained to the walls, others lie in locked rooms, accessible only by the most credentialed scholars under strict supervision. Founded in 1475, but with roots stretching back centuries earlier, the Vatican Library today holds over 1.1 million printed books and more than 80,000 manuscripts. It is a cathedral of knowledge, scientific, theological, philosophical, historical. It houses early editions of Aristotle, Copernicus, and Dante. It holds letters from Michelangelo, treaties signed by emperors, and some of the earliest Bibles ever produced. But it also contains, according to long-held whispers, records of books that were once there and are now gone. What happened to them? Some losses are explainable: wars, fires, theft. The sack of Rome in 1527 saw the looting of countless treasures, including books. In earlier centuries, manuscripts were often lent to scholars or churches across Europe, many of which were never returned. Other volumes were taken by popes during political upheaval, stashed in private collections, or moved to other repositories for preservation. Yet, not all absences are so easily accounted for. Some researchers, upon sifting through centuries-old indexes, have found entries for volumes that no longer exist, listed by title or reference number, sometimes with brief descriptions: Book of Origins, language unknown; Treatise on Angelic Hierarchies translated from Aramaic; Observations of the Antithera mechanism dated to 70 BC. Were these clerical errors, lost copies of existing works, or were they something else? Documents that challenge accepted truths or contain knowledge deemed too volatile to preserve. One story speaks of a manuscript from the early Middle Ages written in a now-dead script said to describe the healing practices of a forgotten sect of early Christians. The book was referenced in a Jesuit's letter from the 1600s, but has never been seen since. Another tale concerns a document found during excavations in the Roman catacombs, an apocryphal gospel detailing a vision of Jesus' life between the ages of 12 and 30, the so-called lost years. If it was real, It disappeared into the Vatican's archives soon after discovery. Then there are the rumours surrounding esoteric texts, alchemical treatises, astrological predictions, forbidden mystical writings. Some believe the Vatican once housed ancient Egyptian or Babylonian scrolls detailing early creation myths, later hidden or destroyed to avoid doctrinal conflict. Others claim that certain heretical books were secretly kept, not burned, studied quietly by theologians seeking to understand rival worldviews. Books banned in public, but preserved in private. Perhaps the most enigmatic of all are the supposed books of prophecy. Some say the Vatican once held manuscripts that chronicled visions of the future written by saints, mystics, or unknown prophets whose names have been lost to time. Whether preserved or purged, no trace remains. Of course, the Vatican denies any wrongdoing. Officials point to the digitization efforts underway. Tens of thousands of volumes now scanned and freely available online. They highlight the transparency granted to approved scholars and the ongoing efforts to catalogue and conserve every known item. And it is true much of the library is open to researchers, but only under specific conditions, only for certain purposes, and only with prior approval. What of the books that never entered into catalogues? The volumes stored in the deep vaults beneath the publicly accessible reading rooms. There are whispers among historians and researchers of a private list separate from the official registry known only to a handful of curators, a list that tracks the truly sensitive works, the forbidden, the fragmentary airy, the unexplained. There is no proof of such a list, only the weight of absence. And it is perhaps this absence that fuels the imagination more than any documented artifact. Because where there are lost pages, there are questions. And where there are questions, there is the enduring possibility of discovery. What texts did the Church once possess? And why were they hidden or destroyed? Could some of these books hold forgotten knowledge, lost histories, or alternative versions of events we think we understand? And more pressingly, is it possible that the Vatican still holds them, waiting, watching, choosing silence over disclosure? In a library built not just to store books but to shape understanding, these disappearances take on a deeper meaning. They are not simply about what is missing, they are about why it's missing. So we are left to wonder, were these books lost to time or deliberately removed from it? And if so, what truths might still lie just beyond reach, tucked between stone walls and secrecy, in a place where knowledge sleeps behind locked doors? From the echo of lost books and vanished manuscripts, knowledge perhaps too dangerous to preserve, we turn now to a mystery of a different kind, less ancient, more tangible, one that doesn't deal in scrolls or relics, but in numbers, in wire transfers, in accounts cloaked behind layers of secrecy. This is not the mystery of the sacred, it is the mystery of money. Behind the fortified walls of Vatican City, just beyond the grandeur of St. Peter's Square, stands a building many never notice. Modest, unassuming, and yet central to one of the most controversial aspects of the Holy See's modern history. It is the Institut Pereiraeon, the Institute for Works of Religion. Most know it simply as the Vatican Bank. Established in 1942 by Pope Pius XII, the bank's stated mission was to manage funds intended for religious or charitable works. It is not officially a bank in the conventional sense. It has no branches, no ATMs, and no interest-bearing accounts for the public. Instead, it serves a select clientele, members of the clergy, religious orders, and certain Catholic institutions worldwide. But over the decades, this quiet financial institution has become the centre of some of the most complex and shadowy financial scandals in European history. The earliest warning signs emerged in the 1960s and 70s as the bank began forging relationships with external financial partners, some of them less than reputable. One name that would rise again and again was Michele Sinindona, an Italian banker with deep connections to organised crime. He was eventually convicted of fraud, murder and mafia collaboration, and he wasn't the only one. Then came the collapse of Banco Ambrosiano in the early 1980s. At the time, Banco Ambrosiano was Italy's second largest private bank. It had deep ties to the Vatican Bank, which owned a substantial stake. But beneath the surface, investigators discovered a tangle of offshore shell companies, falsified records, and hundreds of millions of dollars that had vanished without trace. The bank's chairman, Roberto Calvi, nicknamed God's Banker, was found hanging from London's Blackfriars Bridge in 1982, his pockets stuffed with bricks and foreign currency. His death was initially ruled a suicide, later changed to murder. What did he know? And what exactly was the Vatican Bank's role? Internal investigations revealed that the Vatican Bank had issued letters of credit on behalf of Ambrosiano. When the bank collapsed, over $1.3 billion was missing. The Vatican denied wrongdoing, but agreed to pay a symbolic settlement of $244 million to creditors. It was a gesture of goodwill, they said, not an admission of guilt. Still, suspicions grew. Why were so many of the bank's transactions routed through tax havens? Why were accounts created under pseudonyms? Why was the Vatican so resistant to external audits? Then there were the strange deaths, not just Calvi, but his secretary, who allegedly leapt from a window days later. Sinona, poisoned in prison. A pattern began to emerge, one that seemed to stretch beyond accounting errors or regulatory failures, one that hinted at something more entrenched, something darker. Some theorists linked the bank to the secretive Masonic Lodge propaganda, DEW or P2, a shadow network accused of plotting political subversion in Italy. Others whispered of covert funding operations for anti-communist movements during the Cold War funneled through church channels, and there were rumours, never proven, of the Vatican being used to launder mafia money, using the shield of religious immunity to cloak criminal wealth in sanctified ledgers. In response to these growing concerns, reforms were promised. Popes John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and most notably Pope Francis have all called for greater transparency and oversight. In recent years, steps have been taken to align the Vatican Bank with international anti-money laundering standards. Suspicious accounts have been closed, independent audits have been introduced, and yet the sense of mystery remains. Because despite these reforms, secrecy still clings to the institution like dust on a chalice. The Vatican Bank remains one of the most secretive financial entities in the world. Its clients are shielded, its records are closed to public review. Even its profits, though published annually, are only partially understood, and the scandals haven't stopped. As recently as 2019, the Vatican faced new investigations over suspicious financial dealings involving high-level officials, real estate in London, and funds from charitable accounts. Vatican police raided offices. Senior clerics resigned, and still the full picture remains murky, distorted by denials, redacted reports and internal silence. What is truly at stake? Is the Vatican Bank simply a small institution caught in the tides of global finance, its errors magnified by its sanctity? Or is it something more, a vessel of influence where spiritual authority meets geopolitical maneuvering behind an impenetrable veil? And what of the documents never released? The records were sealed under papal authority. The full details of settlements, transactions, and internal communications are still hidden, known only to a select few within the Curia. Perhaps the Vatican Bank is not so much corrupt as it is caught in a paradox tasked with spiritual mission, yet operating in a world of power, politics, and money, a place where divine intentions meet earthly temptations. And in that collision, mysteries arise. So we are left to ask, how deep does the trail run? What has been lost, hidden, or erased in the name of discretion? And in the world's most sacred city-state, how much of the truth about money remains cloaked in the robes of silence? As we emerge from the murky world of financial secrecy and scandal within the Vatican Bank, another enigma waits. Quieter, more personal, but no less haunting. It begins not with a vault or a ledger, but with a bedchamber in the Apostolic Palace, a lamp left burning, a priest summoned too late, the papal apartment locked from the inside. On the morning of September 29th, 1978, Pope John Paul II was found dead in his bedroom, just 33 days after ascending to the papacy. The Vatican's announcement was a heart attack, no foul play, no autopsy performed. But questions emerged almost immediately, and at the centre of this mystery lies not only a sudden death, but something even more elusive. The missing document is said to have been in the Pope's possession on the night he died. Albino Luciani, the man who became Pope John Paul I, was widely regarded as humble, kind, and deeply committed to reform. He walked without ceremony, spoke with warmth, rejected many of the traditional trappings of papal authority, but behind his gentle demeanour, some say, was a quiet determination to clean house. According to reports from insiders and biographers, Luciani had begun reviewing confidential files in his first days as Pope. Documents detailing financial irregularities, internal corruption, and questionable affiliations within the Curia. He was reportedly alarmed by what he found, especially concerning the Vatican Bank and its connections to Banco Ambrosiano. It is believed that the night before his death, he met privately with several cardinals. Witnesses later claimed he had made a list, names of individuals he intended to reassign, investigate, or remove entirely. Some say he had drafted letters of dismissal, reorganisation plans, and reforms that would have dramatically reshaped the Church's internal power structures. Others claim he was preparing to launch a full inquiry into the Vatican's finances. But if these documents existed, they were never made public. When Vatican staff entered the Pope's chambers that morning, no papers were found on his desk, no memos, no letters, no briefing folders, only the breviary by his bedside and a note scribbled with spiritual reflections. The supposed list of names is gone. The alleged reform plans vanished. Not a single official reference to them appears in the Vatican's account of his final hours. Could it be that such documents never existed? That they were rumours born of grief and suspicion? Or were they removed deliberately before any investigation could begin? Theories abound. One suggests that someone within the Vatican removed the papers as part of a routine cleanup, never realising their significance. Another claims they were taken before the Pope was even found, perhaps by someone with access and motive. Still, others believe the documents were destroyed to prevent them from ever becoming evidence. One of the most persistent theories connects these missing papers to the very scandals Pope John Paul I was allegedly preparing to confront. The Vatican Bank, the shadowy dealings of Roberto Calvi, the secretive Masonic Lodge propaganda duo P2, whose members allegedly included bankers, politicians, and high-ranking clergy. Could Luciani have stumbled onto something dangerous? And if so, was it enough to silence him? The Vatican has never acknowledged the existence of any such documents. No official inventory of the Pope's belongings has ever been released. No inquest was held, no autopsy performed. At the time, church officials insisted that such measures were unnecessary, even inappropriate. But the absence of clear answers only fed speculation. In the decades since, journalists, authors, and investigators have attempted to reconstruct what might have been lost. Some claim to have sources who saw the documents before they disappeared. Others point to inconsistencies in the Vatican's timeline of events, differing accounts of when the Pope was last seen, who found him, and when the alarms were raised. But the truth remains elusive. The archives of the Vatican remain silent on the matter, restricted, sealed. Perhaps the documents are still there, mislabeled or buried among other files, or perhaps they were never archived at all. In 2017, the Vatican formally opened the beatification process for John Paul I, and in 2022, he was declared blessed. The Church now venerates him as a man of profound faith and moral clarity. But the questions surrounding his death and the missing papers remain unresolved. Why was no autopsy conducted on a sitting pope who had served only 33 days? Why were his supposed reform plans never acknowledged? And most critically, what happened to the documents that, according to many, could have altered the course of Vatican history? We may never know, or we may simply be waiting for the right drawer to open, the right envelope to surface, the right archivist to speak. So we are left to wonder, did Pope John Paul II die of natural causes, his work unfinished, his intentions lost to time? Or were his final hours the quiet end to something far larger, silenced not by chance, but by design? And if so, what truth still lies hidden? Just beyond the edge of light from the silence left in the wake of Pope John Paul III's mysterious passing and the vanished documents that may have died with him, we journey now not into modern archives or political corridors, but into the heart of a relic steeped in both history and sacred tradition. A cloth, not unlike the famed Shroud of Tin, yet lesser known and perhaps just as enigmatic. It is kept in the Cathedral of San Salvador in Wedo, northern Spain. Preserved behind glass wrapped in ritual, rarely shown to the public. A piece of linen, blood-stained, ancient, and fiercely protected. They call it the Sudorium of Wedo. Unlike the shroud, the Sudorium does not display an image. There is no face burned into the fibres, no ethereal impression. Instead, what one sees are blotches of reddish-brown stains, irregular, chaotic. And yet beneath this apparent simplicity lies a mystery that has confounded researchers for decades. Measuring approximately 33x21 in, the sudarium is believed by some to be the cloth that was wrapped around the head of Jesus after his death. Specifically mentioned in the Gospel of John in chapter 27, it says, "The cloth that had been around Jesus' head was not lying with the linen cloths, but was folded up in a separate place. This is that cloth," claims the faithful. According to tradition, the sudarium was brought to Spain by Christians fleeing the Muslim conquest of Jerusalem in the 7th century. Its journey, if the accounts are accurate, carried it through North Africa and eventually into the Asturias region of Spain, where it was enshrined in Edo by the 8th century. There it has remained ever since, documented, venerated, and shrouded in quiet reverence. But is it truly what some claim? Scientific analysis has attempted to provide answers. The stains on the sudarium are consistent with pulmonary edema, a condition that occurs during asphyxiation, in which blood and fluid collect in the lungs. This detail is particularly compelling as it supports the notion of death by crucifixion. Blood flow patterns on the cloth suggest that it was used to cover a face tilted to the right, consistent with Roman crucifixion practices and the position of Jesus' head as described in the Gospels. Moreover, forensic comparisons between the bloodstains on the sudarium and those on the Shroud of Turin have revealed a remarkable correlation. Not only do the blood types match, both AB rare and significant, but the facial dimensions and wound patterns align with extraordinary precision. Researchers have overlaid the two cloths and noted that the stains on the sudarium correspond to areas of bleeding seen on the shroud, suggesting they may have touched the same face. But even more curious is this. Unlike the shroud, the sudarium has a well-established historical trail. Documents from the 11th century describe it being moved and displayed during times of danger or plague. Pilgrimage records mention its presence in Ouedo centuries before the Shroud of Turin enters the historical record. If both clothes are authentic, then the sudarium may be the older witness. Yet despite this, the Vatican has never made an official declaration on the cloth's authenticity. It recognises the sudarium as a relic, yes, but stops short of affirming its divine connection. The Church, perhaps wisely, leaves space for mystery. Skeptics, as expected, have raised objections. They question whether the sudarium's journey can truly be traced with confidence across centuries of war, migration, and oral transmission. Some propose that the similarities to the shroud are the result of deliberate fabrication. Others see it as a medieval devotional object created to inspire belief, not deceive. Still, forensic pathologists, textile analysts, and historians continue to study the cloth. In 1989, the Spanish Center for Synindenology conducted a detailed investigation, concluding that the sudarium had indeed wrapped the head of a crucified man. The evidence, they argued, pointed not toward fiction, but toward trauma. And this is where the mystery deepens. Because if the sudarium and the shroud both covered the same body, and if that body truly bore the marks of crucifixion, then what exactly are we looking at? Is it possible that two separate ancient cloths kept in different countries, each with their own providence, could tell a single story? A story of suffering, death, and perhaps resurrection? Or are we, as with so many of the Church's most sacred mysteries, seeing what we wish to see, finding patterns in the bloodstains because we long for them to align? Even in Ouedo itself, the cloth is shown only 3 times a year. On Good Friday, the Feast of the Triumph of the Cross, and the Octave of Easter. The rest of the time it is kept in darkness, preserved, but silent. Perhaps that is where it belongs, not as proof but as a question. So we are left to wonder, is the sudarium of Ouedo a forgotten key to one of the greatest stories in history? Or is it simply a relic of devotion? Its secrets are buried not in science or scripture, but in the space between belief and doubt. From the blood-stained linen of the sudarium of Ouedo, its silent testimony folded into centuries of sacred tradition, we now journey to a place far older, more arid, and perhaps even more revealing. A place where scrolls slept for over 2,000 years, hidden in the cracks of desert stone. Discovered not by scholars, but by a wandering shepherd boy, the Judean desert. Harsh, sun-scovered, and almost otherworldly in its stillness. It was here in 1947, among the cliffs near the ruins of Qumran, that fragments of ancient parchment were found inside clay jars sealed in narrow caves. what emerged from those caverns would go on to reshape biblical scholarship and ignite decades of theological speculation. They are known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, written between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century AD. These texts include some of the oldest surviving copies of the Hebrew Bible, along with hundreds of previously unknown writings, apocalyptic visions, community rules, and esoteric commentaries. Some were composed in Hebrew, others in Aramaic or Greek. Many were incredibly well preserved, despite the centuries that had passed since they were sealed away. And yet, almost as soon as the scrolls were unearthed, another mystery began to grow. Not about what had been found, but about what wasn't shown. Why were certain texts released quickly while others remained unpublished for decades? Who decided what would be shared with the world, and when and what role, if any, did the Vatican play in shaping access to these ancient writings? Officially, the scrolls were the responsibility of a team of scholars working under the Jordanian Department of Antiquities and later under the Israeli Antiquities Authority. Yet for years, this scholarly team was dominated by a small group, many of them Christian, several closely tied to Catholic institutions. Critics would come to call it the Scroll Cartel. Among them was a Dominican priest and biblical scholar named Roland de Vaux, a key figure in early scroll studies and a director of the École Biblique in Jerusalem, a Catholic research institution. Under his guidance, certain texts were made available while others were kept under restricted access for decades. Some researchers alleged that this control slowed publication and discouraged broader analysis. Was this a matter of academic caution, or something more? Rumours soon spread that the Vatican had exerted influence behind the scenes, that it was deeply concerned about certain scrolls being made public, texts that might challenge church doctrine, call into question the origins of Christianity, or shed light on early messianic beliefs in ways the Vatican preferred remain unexplored. One of the most controversial scrolls is the Messianic Apocalypse, which describes a figure who brings the dead to life, heals the sick, and is called the Son of God. This document, written before the time of Jesus, parallels New Testament descriptions of Christ so closely that it raises uncomfortable questions. Were Christian ideas wholly unique or part of a broader and older religious context? Other texts like the War Scroll or the Temple Scroll describe spiritual warfare, secret rites, and a radical end times theology. They speak of battles between light and darkness, of hidden knowledge, and of divine intervention in history. Were these merely the beliefs of a fringe sect like the Essenes, or part of a much wider underground theology that predated Christianity and perhaps influenced it? For decades, independent scholars and journalists demanded broader access to the scrolls. Their frustration peaked in the 1980s and early 90s as academic gatekeeping came under increasing scrutiny. It wasn't until 1991 that the monopoly truly broke, and the scrolls were open to a wide community of researchers. The Vatican, for its part, has consistently denied interfering with the scrolls' publication. There is no formal record of suppression, no conclusive evidence of concealment. But the perception lingers, fed by the Church's long history of guarding religious texts, and by the slow, selective pace at which some scrolls came to light. Could it be that the Church feared what the scrolls might reveal about the historical Jesus, about the origins of Christian sacraments, or the evolution of early Church authority? Or is this simply a case of scholarly bureaucracy amplified by public imagination? Even today, some questions remain unanswered. Not all the scrolls have been fully translated. Some fragments are so damaged that they exist only as faint ink on crumbling parchment. Others remain contextually obscure, hinting at ideas that modern scholars still struggle to interpret. And while most of the scrolls are now digitized and accessible, the full implications of their content are still being debated. The Vatican, while not officially involved in scroll preservation, has shown renewed interest in ancient texts and Judaic Christian origins in recent decades. The Vatican, while not officially involved in scroll preservation, has shown renewed interest in ancient texts and Judaic Christian origins in recent decades. Some see this as an effort to bridge gaps between faiths. Others suspect a quiet attempt to reclaim narrative control. Ultimately, the Dead Sea Scrolls are a reminder that history, especially sacred history, is never static. It is a living dialogue between what was written, what was hidden, and what is slowly rediscovered. So, we are left to ask, what truths lie in the fragments still unread? What visions of God, humanity, and salvation are sealed not in vaults, but in silence. And if the Vatican once watched these scrolls with wary eyes, does it still? From the ancient scrolls hidden in desert caves, fragments that might redefine our understanding of faith, we now follow a mystery older still, a mystery that spans continents, faiths and centuries, an object lost to history, shrouded in power, awe and reverence. The Ark of the Covenant, described in the Book of Exodus as a golden chest, fashioned according to divine instruction, it was said to house the 2 stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. Measuring roughly 4 feet long and 2 feet wide, the Ark was adorned with rings of gold and crowned by 2 cherubim whose wings touched above the mercy seat. The place where tradition holds the presence of God would descend. But it was never merely symbolic. In biblical texts, the Ark parts rivers, levels city walls, and strikes down those who touch it unworthily. It radiated divine authority, too sacred to be seen, too powerful to be mishandled, and then it vanished. The last confirmed mention of the Ark appears during the reign of King Josiah in the 7th century BC. By the time the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the First Temple in 586 BC, the Ark was gone. Not destroyed, not captured, simply missing. And so began one of the greatest religious mysteries in recorded history. Where did it go? Over the centuries, theories have abounded. Some scholars believe it was hidden deep beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, concealed in a network of tunnels and chambers before the Babylonian invasion. Others suggest it was smuggled away during earlier political upheavals, safeguarded by priests who foresaw the coming destruction. But there is one theory that has captivated imaginations for generations, that the Ark was taken south, far south, out of the Levant, entirely to Ethiopia. In the city of Axum, hidden within the stone walls of a modest ivy-covered chapel known as the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, lies what Ethiopian Orthodox Christians claim is the true Ark of the Covenant. Guarded by a single monk who alone is allowed to see it, the Ark is said to rest in total isolation, never displayed, never moved. According to Ethiopian tradition, the Ark was brought to their land by Menelik, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. The story goes that during a visit to Jerusalem, Menelik took the Ark with him, either as a divine gift or a secret theft, carrying it across the Red Sea and into the highlands of East Africa. Western scholars often dismiss this tale as myth. Yet, when examined closely, the story reveals an unbroken tradition upheld for nearly 3,000 years. The Ethiopian Church, one of the oldest Christian institutions on earth, has built its liturgy, rituals and identity around the Ark's presence. Every major church in Ethiopia houses a rabbit, a symbolic replica of the Ark, without which no Mass may be performed. But why then has the world never seen it? Journalists, researchers and historians have attempted to gain access. All have been denied. Even the few who have entered the compound have not been allowed to see the Ark itself. The guardian monk appointed for life claims to have visions, to hear the voice of God and to bear the responsibility of protecting a relic too sacred for human eyes. Is it true? Could a biblical artifact of such magnitude be hidden in plain sight, guarded not by vaults or armies, but by tradition? Some argue the object in Oxum may be a later replica, a symbol preserved through faith rather than history. Others speculate that the real Ark, if it ever left Jerusalem, was lost during the journey or hidden in yet another unknown location. And then there are those who suggest the Vatican knows more than it admits. In 2009, Patriarch Abuna Palos, then head of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, visited the Vatican and met with Pope Benedict XVI. Shortly afterward, he claimed he would reveal the Ark to the world. The announcement was quickly retracted. No explanation given, no unveiling occurred. Did the Vatican intervene? Was pressure applied to preserve secrecy? Or did the Patriarch realise that some mysteries are best left untouched? Over the years, rumours have swirled that the Ark may reside not in Ethiopia, but in the vaults beneath St. Peter's Basilica itself, transported at some point in the distant past, sealed away alongside other relics too powerful or too dangerous to be known. But no evidence has ever emerged. Perhaps the Ark truly was destroyed, burned with the temple, reduced to ashes beneath Babylonian fire. Or perhaps it was hidden with divine intent, never meant to be found but only remembered. A symbol of covenant, of mystery, of divine power that eludes human control, and yet something endures. A persistent idea spanning continents and cultures that the Ark is still out there, that beneath the stone and silence it waits. So we are left to wonder if the Ark of the Covenant still exists. What would its discovery mean? Would it affirm faith or unsettle it? And in a world shaped by secrets and sacred authority, who decides whether it should ever be found at all? As our search for the Ark of the Covenant winds through sacred chambers and ancient legends, we lift our gaze once again. This time toward the heavens, but not in metaphor, not in prayer, in search of something other, something perhaps not divine, yet not entirely human either. It begins not in secrecy, but in science. High on Mount Graham in Arizona, the Vatican maintains one of the most advanced astronomical observatories in the world. Operated in collaboration with international universities, the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope peers deep into space, charting stars and galaxies, searching for planetary systems beyond our own. Some might find this surprising. A religious institution so rooted in the sacred, investing heavily in the empirical. And yet this celestial curiosity is not new. The Vatican has been gazing at the stars for centuries. But what exactly are they hoping to find? Or perhaps more pointedly, what do they already know? In recent decades, an unexpected theme has quietly surfaced in the discourse of Vatican officials: the possibility of intelligent extraterrestrial life. Far from dismissing the idea, key figures within the Church have spoken openly about its implications, both theological and existential. In 2008, Father José Gabriel Fess, then director of the Vatican Observatory, made headlines when he declared in an interview with L'Osservatore Romano that believing in the existence of aliens does not contradict our faith. He went further, suggesting that extraterrestrials could be our brothers created by the same God who made humanity. His words were not casual, they were deliberate, thoughtful, and some argue a prelude. Was this mere speculation, a philosophical gesture, or was it preparation? The Vatican's interest in the subject has not been limited to astronomers. Theologians and philosophers within the Church have increasingly engaged with the question, what happens to Christian doctrine if we are not alone? Would alien beings require salvation? Could they be sinless? Would they share in Christ's redemption, or possess a different relationship with the divine altogether? And why at this moment in history is the Church asking these questions? In the background of this quiet theological reflection, governments around the world have begun to shift their posture on unidentified aerial phenomena. Once dismissed as conspiracy or fantasy, these encounters are now being discussed in military briefings, declassified documents, and congressional hearings. Pilots speak of objects that defy physics. Sensors capture movements no known technology can replicate. The United States has openly acknowledged the existence of UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena, and established task forces to study them. In this evolving landscape, some believe the Vatican's subtle engagement with the topic is not coincidental. Could the Holy See, with its global intelligence networks, its centuries-old archives, and its deeply embedded role in geopolitical affairs, have access to knowledge the public does not? If so, how would it choose to prepare humanity for such a revelation? Would it soften the ground, gradually reframing theological boundaries as some claim it already has? There are even whispers, unconfirmed of course, that the Vatican was consulted during early stages of alien-related research by world powers that its moral and cultural influence made it a quiet partner in the question of disclosure. Some point to secret archives, to hidden documents dating back centuries, letters perhaps, describing encounters or visions interpreted as divine, but now re-evaluated through a different lens. Others invoke the Fatima apparitions of 1917, noting that the descriptions of luminous beings and strange aerial phenomena bear an eerie resemblance to modern reports of UAP encounters. Could certain religious visions across time have been misunderstood interactions with something other? Again, the Vatican has not confirmed such interpretations, and yet it has never condemned the conversation either. There is also the curious relationship between Vatican astronomers and scientists studying exoplanets, worlds orbiting distant stars. In recent decades, the search for life has moved from science fiction to mainstream research. Planets in the so-called habitable zone are no longer rare. The question is no longer if life exists elsewhere, but when we will find it, and when that day comes, who will help interpret its meaning? In this, the Vatican may be playing a longer game. one rooted not in secrecy, but in stewardship, guiding the faithful through what could be the most profound paradigm shift in human history. Or perhaps it already has. What if evidence of intelligent life has been encountered, not conclusively, not publicly, but quietly, in classified briefings, in unexplained observations? And what if the Vatican, ever cautious, ever deliberate, has chosen silence over disclosure, not to deceive, but to prepare? This is the line between knowledge and mystery, between faith and the unknown. As global governments inch toward greater transparency, the Church appears to be waiting, not obstructing, but not rushing forward either, watching, reflecting, perhaps already knowing. So, we're left to wonder, what role does the Vatican truly play in the question of alien life? Is it merely a thoughtful observer or a silent partner in a disclosure far greater than we imagine? And if that revelation comes, whether tomorrow or in decades, will we find that the Church was never behind the curve, but always quietly ahead? As our attention shifts from the stars above to the eternal city, below we return once again to stone, shadow and sacred earth. Beneath the vast dome of St. Peter's Basilica, beneath centuries of faith and the footsteps of pilgrims, lies a silence more ancient than the Church itself. A silence said to hold the bones of the man who, according to tradition, was the first bishop of Rome, the man called Peter. The site is known as the necropolis, a burial ground hidden beneath the basilica's foundations, inaccessible to most, lit only by careful hands and protected by layers of marble and secrecy. It is not a mythic place, it is real. A labyrinth of mausoleums, inscriptions and tombs, dating back to the 1st centuries AD, preserved beneath the modern basilica like a fossil in cathedral stone, and at its heart a humble wall covered in red plaster once adorned with early Christian graffiti. The trophy of gas named after a 2nd century priest who described a monument built above the tomb of Peter. The site became a point of veneration for early Christians. Over time, it was obscured by layers of altars, chapels, and eventually the entire basilica we know today. For centuries, its existence was rumoured but unconfirmed, an idea buried beneath tradition. That changed in 1939 following the death of Pope Pius XI. Excavations beneath St. Peter's were quietly initiated, intended merely to expand the Pope's burial crypt. What began as a simple project quickly became an archaeological revelation. As workers descended through layers of Renaissance and medieval construction, they found something unexpected: a Roman necropolis. Astonishingly intact family tombs, pagan symbols, Christian inscriptions, and at the centre the structure described by gas. The Vatican kept the discovery under wraps for years, not out of malice, but caution. What if the tomb was empty? What if it belonged to someone else entirely? Then in 1950, Pope Pius XII announced that Peter's tomb had indeed been found. But no bones were displayed, no relics shown, and the mystery deepened. In the years that followed, controversy emerged over the bones themselves. In a niche behind the red wall known as loculus, bones were found, first dismissed, then re-examined. Initially, archaeologist Margherita Guarducci, working closely with the Vatican, claimed that the bones had been moved during earlier construction, stored in a nearby marble-lined box. The remains were analysed. Bones of a man in his 60s or 70s, consistent with the age Peter would have been at death. No skull, but feet missing, perhaps sawn off, as was sometimes done in crucifixions to remove bodies from crosses nailed into the earth. The Vatican later announced in 1968 that the bones were identified in a manner which we can hold to be convincing as belonging to St. Peter. Yet no formal declaration of absolute certainty was made. To this day, the remains are kept in a sealed reliquary, shown only on rare occasions. There is no public display, no DNA testing, and questions remain. Skeptics point out that Roman burial practices often involved reuse of tombs. Could the bones belong to another elderly man, honoured perhaps but not Peter? Could early Christians have chosen this site for symbolic reasons, retroactively assigning it to the apostle? After all, ancient Rome was not a city of preserved truths, but of layered memory, adapted through time and belief. Others questioned the methods used in the identification process. The bones were found mixed with animal remains and other human fragments, raising doubts about their original placement. The absence of the skull is also noted, though intriguingly the Basilica of St. John Ladan claims to house the skulls of both Peter and Paul in ornate reliquaries, a claim never fully investigated. And then there are the inscriptions. One fragment of graffiti near the burial reads Petro in Greek for Peter is here. Just 2 words, faint, possibly incomplete. But is it a marker of identity or of memory? Was it meant as a declaration, a prayer, or a symbol of the Christian community's spiritual foundation? The Church has over time adopted a careful stance. The bones are venerated as relics of Peter, but official declarations speak of belief, not proof, faith, not forensic certainty. Still, the power of place cannot be ignored. Every inch of St. Peter's Basilica is built to point toward this sacred core. The main altar stands directly above the ancient tomb, crowned by Bernini's towering bronze building. It is not a coincidence. It is a statement that here in this place rests the rock upon which the church was built. But what if he's not there? What if Peter's bones lie elsewhere, lost in the chaos of Nero's executions, burned in the circus, scattered in anonymous graves? Would it change anything? Or would the tomb, even if symbolic, still carry the same weight? Perhaps that is the deeper mystery. Not whether the bones are real, but what they represent. A continuity stretching across millennia, a human anchor to a divine story, a reminder that behind every institution, no matter how grand, lies a single fragile life. So we are left to wonder, are these truly the bones of the fisherman-turned-apostle crucified upside down in the shadows of Rome? Or are they a relic of faith itself, carefully placed, carefully protected, never fully revealed? And if certainty remains out of reach, is mystery the point? From the silent tomb beneath St. Peter's Basilica, where bones may or may not belong to the Church's first leader, we move now into the fragile world of ancient ink, brittle parchment and lost voices. Voices not buried beneath stone, but buried beneath history itself, hidden for centuries, resisted by doctrine, and only recently allowed to speak again. This is the mystery of the Gospel of Judas. Not a modern forgery, not heretical fiction, but a real ancient manuscript recovered from the edge of oblivion, written in Coptic, on a papyrus codex discovered in the Egyptian desert sometime in the 1970s, smuggled, mishandled, sold, lost and recovered again. The manuscript passed through black markets and bank vaults before finally reaching scholars in the early 2000s. By then fragile, fragmented, and in need of urgent restoration. What it contained was nothing less than a theological bombshell. Unlike the canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospel of Judas presents a radically different view of one of the most infamous figures in Christian tradition. In the canonical texts, Judas Iscariot is the betrayer, the disciple who hands Jesus over to the authorities for 30 pieces of silver, triggering the crucifixion. His name has become synonymous with treachery. But in this alternate gospel, Judas is not the villain. He is the only disciple who truly understands Jesus, the one chosen to carry out a divine mission, a secret mission. According to this text, Jesus tells Judas, "You will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." The implication that Judas's betrayal was not a sin, but an act of obedience done not in malice but in trust, a necessary step in a cosmic plan beyond the comprehension of the other disciples. The Gospel of Judas doesn't follow the structure of the canonical Gospels. There's no nativity, no parables, no resurrection narrative. Instead, it is a dialogue, a philosophical and mystical conversation between Jesus and Judas infused with language drawn from Gnostic thought. But what exactly is Gnosticism emerging in the first few centuries? AD Gnostic sects viewed the material world as a flawed creation, sometimes even a prison crafted not by the true ultimate God, but by a lesser divine being. Salvation for them did not come through obedience or faith alone, but through gnosis, hidden knowledge, inner revelation, a spiritual awakening from illusion. Within this framework, Judas becomes not a traitor but a revealer, the only one willing to understand the deeper truth behind Jesus' earthly mission. And in doing so, he enables the release of the divine spirit trapped within the physical body of Christ. To mainstream Christianity, this is heresy. But to scholars, it's something else. An alternative narrative from a time when Christian thought was still fluid, contested, diverse. So why was this gospel lost? And why, when it resurfaced, did it provoke such unease? The earliest known reference to the Gospel of Judas appears in the writings of Irenaeus of Lyon, a church father who condemned the text around 180 AD as a dangerous distortion. It was listed among dozens of non-canonical writings suppressed during the formation of orthodoxy. Over time, as the church consolidated its authority, alternative gospels like this one were systematically excluded. Their followers labelled them as heretics. Most were lost, burned, buried, forgotten. That this single copy of the Gospel of Judas survived at all is nothing short of miraculous. And yet, questions linger. Why did it reappear when it did? Who preserved it for so long? And what role, if any, has the Vatican played in controlling the narrative around its content? Officially, the Vatican has acknowledged the text's existence, but firmly dismissed its theological relevance. It is a Gnostic document, they say, representative of a fringe belief system long rejected by the Church. It changes nothing. But some theologians and historians are not so sure. Could this gospel reflect real beliefs held by early Christian communities? Could it offer insight into the diverse ways Jesus and his teachings were interpreted in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD before one version became dominant? And why does the idea of a redeemed Judas provoke such resistance? Perhaps it's because Judas is more than a historical figure. He is a symbol, a shadow cast across the Passion narrative. To recast him as enlightened, chosen would unravel centuries of doctrine, art, and collective imagination. And yet, something about the Gospel of Judas endures, not because it rewrites history, but because it challenges us to see beyond the official version, to ask, what stories were silenced, what truths were hidden? The manuscript itself now rests in the Coptic Museum in Cairo, preserved after painstaking restoration, but its journey is far from over. Its words continue to ripple outward, quietly, provocatively, inviting reflection not only on Judas, but on the very foundations of Christian belief. So we are left to wonder, is the Gospel of Judas simply a heretical footnote in the history of faith? Or is it a glimpse into a lost spiritual worldview, one that still holds echoes of the earliest, most unsettling questions about sacrifice, loyalty, and divine intent? From the lost voice of Judas, resurrected from the sands of Egypt and the margins of Scripture. We turn now to another voice silenced not by time but by fire. A man who dared to ask questions too far ahead of his time. A man whose death still lingers like smoke over the heart of Rome. February 17th, 1600, Campo de' Fiori. A broad cobbled square nestled between churches, markets, and the murmurs of the eternal city. That morning it was not the scent of herbs and fresh bread that filled the air, but something darker, burning flesh and scorched parchment. At the centre of the square, bound and gagged, stood Giordano Bruno. He was not a heretic in the way we often imagine. He was not an enemy of God, nor a mere provocator. He was a philosopher, a mathematician, a mystic, and some say a visionary. A former Dominican friar whose mind could not be contained by dogma or fear. And yet, it was that very mind that brought him here to this moment, to this flame. What did Bruno believe? And why did the church feel so threatened? Born in Nola near Naples in 1548, Bruno entered religious life early, joining the Dominicans before his 20th birthday. But his intellectual appetite quickly exceeded the boundaries of orthodoxy. He questioned the nature of the Trinity, rejected the infallibility of the Church, and openly discussed alternative cosmologies, ideas rooted in the works of Copernicus, and expanded into radical new territory. Bruno proposed that the stars were distant suns surrounded by their own planets, perhaps even worlds with life. He spoke of an infinite universe without a centre and without a privileged place for Earth. In doing so, he dismantled more than a model of the cosmos. He dismantled an entire worldview, one in which heaven was above, man was central, and the divine plan neatly ordered. But Bruno didn't stop at astronomy. He explored reincarnation, claimed the soul was eternal and unbound, and argued that divinity was not confined to any single form, but present throughout the universe. To some, these were the words of a mystic poet. To others, the whispers of dangerous subversion. By the time he arrived in Rome in 1592, Bruno had already fled multiple cities, been excommunicated from multiple churches, and drawn suspicion from Catholic and Protestant authorities alike. But in Rome, suspicion became condemnation. He was arrested by the Roman Inquisition and held in confinement for nearly 8 years. During his trial, the charges against him were varied and complex: denial of key Catholic doctrines, belief in multiple worlds, pantheism, and more. Bruno refused to recant. His final words before the tribunal are said to have been, "Perhaps you who pronounce this sentence are in greater fear than I who receive it." Then he was led to the stake, naked, gagged, bound, and burned alive. In the centuries since, Giordano Bruno has become a symbol for science, for freedom of thought, for the right to ask questions, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. But his execution remains a dark stain, one the Vatican has never fully erased. To this day, the bronze statue of Bruno stands in Campo dei Ori, erected in 1889 by a group of secular intellectuals. He faces the Vatican defiantly, his hooded eyes staring across the centuries, but there is more to this story than martyrdom. Some have speculated that Bruno's execution was not solely about theology or cosmology, that it may have involved other forces, political, secretive, even esoteric. Bruno was deeply involved in Hermetic philosophy, studying texts that blended Egyptian mysticism with Christian thought. He was interested in memory palaces, symbolic magic, and the deeper structures of reality. His writings hint at lost knowledge, ancient wisdom carried forward through symbols, not scripture. Was the Church afraid of Bruno's science or something else? There are those who believe Bruno was in possession of texts or teachings considered too dangerous to be made public. Others suggest that his teachings challenged not just doctrine, but the control of knowledge itself. Knowledge that, if unleashed, could undermine the Church's authority over the interpretation of truth. Is that why he was silenced for so long? Even the Vatican's modern reflections on Bruno remain guarded. While recent popes have acknowledged the tragedy of his execution, they stopped short of declaring him innocent. He remains in Church eyes a complex figure, perhaps brilliant, but ultimately heretical. And yet the questions he asked still resonate. What is the nature of the universe? Are we alone? Is God confined to a single narrative or diffused throughout infinite worlds? And who decides which questions are allowed to be asked? Today, Bruno is read in philosophy classes, remembered in scientific circles, and revered by those who see in him the courage to think freely. But some still wonder what was lost when his books were banned, his thoughts condemned, and his voice extinguished in flame. So we are left to ask, did Bruno die because he dared to imagine the stars, or because he dared to imagine too much more? And in the silence that followed his execution, what truths might have been buried? Truths still waiting to be found in dusty libraries, coded texts, or forgotten margins of forbidden books. From the flames that consumed Giordano Bruno, fires meant to erase forbidden ideas, we now shift our gaze to the smoke that rises over Vatican rooftops in modern times. A smoke both symbolic and mysterious, signalling not the suppression of dissent, but the arrival of power, silent, ancient, and thick with ritual. This is the conclave, the secretive process by which the next Bishop of Rome, the spiritual leader of over 1 billion Catholics, is chosen. A ritual not merely of votes and ballots, but of centuries-old rules, whispered customs, and layers of secrecy that continue to raise questions even now. The doors to the Chine Chapel close with solemn weight. Outside, the world watches. Inside, silence reigns. Cardinals in crimson robes, aged and burdened with responsibility, gather beneath Michelangelo's painted ceiling, an image of divine creation towering above the men now tasked with appointing God's representative on earth. The word conclave comes from the Latin conclave with a key, and indeed, once the cardinals are sealed inside, they are cut off entirely from the outside world. No phones, no messages, no whispers of influence, at least in theory. But is it really so impenetrable? The rituals of papal election trace their roots to the 13th century. In 1268, after nearly 3 years without a pope, the people of Curbo, Italy, locked the cardinals in the episcopal palace and even removed its roof to hasten their decision. The practice of seclusion and the pressure that comes with it became a permanent feature of the process thereafter. Today, the Chine Chapel is converted into a place of deliberate isolation. Electronic sweeps are performed to ensure no surveillance devices are present. Jamming technology is used to block transmissions. The cardinals sleep in a nearby residence but are under continuous guard. Every effort is made to prevent external interference, and yet questions persist. What conversations happen in the shadows of the chapel far from official records? What alliances are formed in the quiet hours between ballots? Theoretically, cardinals are forbidden from campaigning for themselves or promising favours in exchange for votes. But the human element cannot be entirely removed from the sacred. Over the centuries, accusations have emerged of secret lobbying, political manoeuvring, and even external influence, whether by monarchs, intelligence agencies, or clandestine orders. During the Cold War, rumours circulated of KGB interest in papal succession. More recently, theories have suggested that even the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI in 2013, an event unprecedented in 6 centuries, may have involved hidden pressures within the Church. Of course, none of this is proven. But in a process so tightly controlled, so shielded from transparency, the absence of answers invites speculation. The voting itself is a study in ritual precision. Each cardinal writes a name on a folded ballot, approaches the altar, and declares under oath that the vote is given in full freedom. The ballots are collected, counted, and then burned along with chemical agents that produce black or white smoke. Black means no decision. White means a new pope has been chosen. But who prepares those ballots? Who watches the watchers? Are there safeguards against manipulation? Or in the shadows of centuries, could subtle pressures still shape the outcome in ways the public never sees? Even the moment of announcement is steeped in theatrical mystery. After the white smoke, the bells of St. Peter's ring. A cardinal steps onto the balcony and declares, "Habemus Papam," we have a pope. A name is revealed. A man appears. Applause echoes across the square. But the decisions, the discussions, the debates that led to that moment remain locked behind the chapel walls forever. And then there are the deeper questions. What prayers are whispered in those final moments before a name is written down? Do the cardinals feel the weight of divine inspiration, or the pull of politics, nationality, ideology? And what happens if a pope is elected who holds views that unsettle the existing balance within the Church? Is the conclave still a sacred selection guided by the Holy Spirit? Or has it over time become a carefully managed mechanism for maintaining institutional continuity? There are also more obscure elements of the ritual, fragments from older times that linger on the edges. Legends tell of a test once performed with a special chair to verify the gender of the Pope, an echo of the Pope Joan myth. Others speak of secret prayers passed from Pope to Pop, or of a hidden document that each pontiff reads upon ascension. Guidance known only to those who wear the ring of the fisherman. And what of the rumours that the Vatican archives contain profiles on every eligible cardinal? Dossiers detailing their politics, their pasts, their loyalties. Is the conclave truly a vote of conscience or a vote shaped by knowledge not shared with the outside world? Even the moment when the chosen pope accepts his role is shrouded in silence. He's asked, "Do you accept your canonical election as supreme pontiff?" And if he says yes, he is immediately pope. No further ceremony required, just a word and a new era begins. Yet in that instant between man and mantle, what happens? Does he feel the weight of Peter's keys or the burden of centuries? So we are left to ponder. Is the conclave a perfect vessel of divine will unmarred by human complexity? Or is it a theatre of shadows where faith and strategy intertwine beneath a frescoed ceiling? And as the world watches the smoke rise once again, what truths may forever remain behind the veil? From the whispered alliances and sacred secrecy of the papal conclave, we now move into the heart of the Vatican itself. Past the gilded halls and frescoed ceilings of the Apostolic Palace, through corridors only a handful of men have ever walked without escort, there lies a door, modest in appearance, unmarked by grandeur. Its wood is dark, its hinges silent, but what lies beyond it remains unknown. This is the mystery of the sealed room in the Apostolic Palace. The Vatican is no stranger to locked doors. Within its walls are archives, vaults, libraries, and private chambers, each with its own threshold of access. But the sealed room, sometimes referred to in internal whispers as La Stanza, has captured the imagination of scholars, historians, and even cardinals. Very little is publicly acknowledged about the room's origin or purpose. Official Vatican architectural plans mention it only obliquely, if at all. Some believe it was part of a now unused residential suite once assigned to a long-deceased pope. Others claim it is a chamber constructed during the Counter-Reformation, built with precision, isolated by design, its walls thicker than those around it. And yet no pope in modern memory is known to have spoken about it. What then is inside? One popular theory suggests that the room houses a cache of documents too controversial, too destabilizing to be included even in the Vatican Secret Archives. Writings from condemned mystics, papal letters never made public, treatises on forbidden theology, records of internal schisms within the Church, carefully covered and never resolved. Others believe the chamber serves not as a vault, but as a sanctuary, perhaps used only in moments of extreme crisis, a place of refuge during wartime or political upheaval. During World War II, rumours swirled that certain rooms of the Apostolic Palace were outfitted to shelter high-ranking clergy or hidden figures. Was this one of them? Then there are the more speculative claims. Some suggest that the sealed room is home to a single extraordinary relic, an object too sacred or too dangerous to display. A fragment of the true cross, an original scroll from the Dead Sea caves, or something else entirely. An artifact whose very nature would challenge the world's understanding of faith, science, or history. Occasionally whispers surface from those who claim to have seen the room, or more often to have met someone who did. These accounts describe a space frozen in time, dustless, undisturbed, dimly lit, lined with old wood, or perhaps bare stone. Some speak of books, unmarked, handbound, ancient. Others mention a single chair facing a blank wall as if awaiting a visitor who never arrived. Of course, none of these stories can be verified. The Vatican, when asked directly about the room, offers no comment. Officials neither confirm nor deny its existence, and those with security clearance are bound by oaths as old as the papacy itself. Oaths that extend beyond death, reinforced not by law, but by loyalty. What would require such secrecy? Could the room contain evidence of an earlier papacy covered up, or theological research suppressed because of its implications? Could it be linked to any of the unresolved Vatican controversies, the sudden death of Pope John Paul I, for instance, or the missing documents surrounding his brief reign? Some theorists even suggest the room may house psychological records, notes from papal confessions or personal journals never meant for public eyes. Documents that, if released, would offer a human and perhaps troubling portrait of leaders often portrayed as larger than life. But perhaps the most chilling theory is not about what's kept inside, but what is kept out. According to an old Vatican legend, one passed down among guards and whispered by seminarians, the sealed room was created not to protect a relic or a secret, but to contain something, a presence, a voice, an artifact that emits no light, but affects those nearby in subtle, disquieting ways. These are tales, of course, fragments from a religious city built on myth and mystery, but like all legends, they persist because they are never quite disproved. In the end, what is most intriguing about the sealed room is how it is hidden in plain sight. No barrier of lasers or steel, no trapdoor or ancient curse, just a door, quiet, simple and unvisited. And yet no modern pope has opened it publicly. No camera has documented its interior. No record of its true function has ever been included in official Vatican histories. So we are left to wonder what lies beyond that threshold. A forgotten archive, a symbol of papal solitude, or something more elusive, something the Church has chosen deliberately to lock away. In a city-state defined by ritual, silence and sacred trust, some doors are not open with keys. They are opened, if ever, with understanding. And perhaps that is the final question. Not whether the sealed room holds a secret, but whether the world is ready for what it might reveal. From the unmarked door of the sealed room, locked in silence at the heart of the Apostolic Palace, we step now into another kind of mystery, one that does not hide behind stone or steel, but rises quietly in the open in fields, in forests, in remote villages where ordinary people claim to witness something extraordinary. Apparitions, visitations, the divine stepping, however briefly, into the mortal world, and perhaps more curiously, how the Vatican often chooses not to speak. Throughout history, accounts of Marian apparitions, sightings of the Virgin Mary have stirred awe, devotion, controversy and division. Some have become world-renowned. Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe. Others remain obscure, whispered only in local prayer circles or dismissed by church officials as private delusions. But what unites many of these accounts is not just the vision itself, but the long echoing silence that follows. Take for instance the village of Megorje, nestled among the hills of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Since 1981, 6 young people have claimed to receive repeated visitations from a luminous female figure identifying herself as the Virgin Mary. Her messages, they say, call for peace, prayer and penance, but also contain warnings of spiritual decline, of chastisement, of a future in which choices will shape the fate of nations. Pilgrims began arriving in the thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Testimonies of healing and conversion poured in. The village transformed into a global spiritual centre, and yet the Vatican did not confirm the apparitions. For decades, it neither condemned them outright nor embraced them fully. Why? Some suggest caution. The Church, after all, takes its role as guardian of orthodoxy seriously. Investigations into such claims are methodical, often spanning decades involving theologians, psychologists and local bishops. But others see something more deliberate, a strategy not of denial but of containment. Because for every sanctioned apparition, dozens go unacknowledged. In the Philippines, in Japan, in Nigeria, in rural Italy and South America, reports have surfaced. Some with photos, others with cryptic messages allegedly dictated by the apparitions themselves. Some contain references to global upheaval, future catastrophes, or secrets that mirror the tone of the third secret of Fatima. Still, the Vatican remains largely silent. Why do some visions receive approval while others are left in the shadows? Officially, the Church distinguishes between public revelation, that which is binding on the faithful, ending with the death of the last apostle, and private revelation, which even when approved does not carry the same doctrinal weight. This gives the Vatican a theological framework for engaging with mystical claims without altering core belief. But critics argue that the Church's prolonged silence in many cases is not theological, it's political. Apparitions often emerge in times of turmoil, war, persecution, societal collapse. They draw followers, sometimes outside of ecclesiastical control. In Medjugorje, for instance, the visionaries continued to receive messages long after the initial apparitions. This made them unpredictable. Their messages bypassed hierarchy. Their authority came not from ordination, but from experience. And this, some believe, is the real reason for Rome's reticence. Could it be that certain apparitions pose a challenge to the Church's control over narrative and revelation? That they open the door to a more mystical, decentralized form of faith, one the Vatican cannot easily regulate? Others suggest something even more provocative. What if some apparitions contain elements too disruptive to reveal? Warnings not just about spiritual decay, but about internal Church corruption, coming wars or cosmic events. What if messages received in these apparitions echo apocalyptic or prophetic content the Vatican already possesses and would rather not see validated publicly? There are whispers, always whispers, that some apparitions have been investigated and found credible, but silenced to avoid panic. That certain messages have been read by popes, sealed in archives, or quietly folded into homilies without revealing their source. And yet, not all Vatican silence is absent. Sometimes it is presence disguised. Take the case of Akita, Japan. In the 1970s, a nun named Sister Agnes Sasagawa reported visions of Mary along with a weeping statue and messages warning of fire falling from the sky and divisions within the Church from bishop against bishop. Though the local bishop declared the events worthy of belief, the Vatican never formally commented. And yet years later, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, is said to have quietly affirmed the authenticity of the messages in private. What does that mean? Could the Vatican in its silence be validating some apparitions quietly without official endorsement, while avoiding the wider consequences such confirmation would entail? Or is it possible that Rome, as custodian of centuries of religious phenomena, has simply seen too many of these events to react with surprise? Behind the scenes, a complex theology of vision and message is already being applied, just not shared. Perhaps the real mystery is not whether these apparitions are real, but how the Church chooses to respond when the divine seems to bypass the usual channels. So we are left to wonder, is Vatican silence a form of prudence or of protection? Are the apparitions too sacred, too destabilizing, or too truthful to be fully embraced? And in a world that still looks skyward for signs and wonders, what visions remain unspoken, awaiting acknowledgement in a language the Church may not yet be ready to use? From the hushed uncertainty surrounding unexplained apparitions, we now descend into something even more deliberate, more structured. A catalogue not of visions but of ideas, a list born not of celestial phenomena, but of human words deemed too dangerous to be read. Hidden behind the stately walls of the Vatican, bound in old leather and preserved with the weight of centuries, lies a document unlike any other in church history. The Index Liorum Prohibitorum, the Index of Forbidden Books. At first glance, it appears unassuming rows of titles, names, and dates methodically organised. But beneath that cold precision lies a legacy of fear, control, and unanswered questions. For nearly 400 years, this index was the Church's official list of books banned for being heretical, immoral, or otherwise threatening to the faith. The list spanned continents, crossed empires, and shaped what millions of people were allowed or forbidden to read. But what was the Church so afraid of? Established in 1559 under Pope Paul X during the throes of the Counter-Reformation, the index was meant to be a shield, a safeguard for souls. It came in response to a flood of printed material thanks to Gutenberg's press that made it possible for new ideas to travel faster than ever before. Ideas that challenged church authority, questioned doctrine, or explored the world beyond the limits of sanctioned theology. Some entries are predictable. Protestant tracts, works of openly heretical theologians, writings that directly attacked papal supremacy or Catholic tradition. But others are more surprising. Galileo, Galilee's dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, was once included condemned not for science itself, but for presenting a heliocentric universe as fact contrary to church teaching at the time. René Descartes, Immanuel Kant, Jean-Paul Sartre each found themselves on the list for philosophical views deemed corrosive to the faith. Even novels, fictional stories were considered suspect. Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, Alexandre Dumas, The Count of Monte Cristo, and the poetry of Lord Byron all appeared on the index at different times. Sometimes for political undertones, sometimes for morality, sometimes simply for tone. The list grew and evolved with time, and with each new entry, the mystery deepened. Was the index merely an instrument of censorship, or was it also a record, an encoded ledger of ideas the Church feared might unravel its deepest structures? Perhaps the most curious aspect of the index is not the books that were listed, but the ones that were rumoured to have been considered yet never officially named. Some believe that unpublished manuscripts, works circulating in secret among intellectuals, mystics, or rogue clergy, were monitored quietly, their contents discussed behind closed doors, but never listed publicly. Other texts, such as certain alchemical treatises, esoteric grimoires, and Gnostic Gospels may have been deemed too obscure for the general public, yet too dangerous to ignore. Could these Aphindex works still exist in Vatican collections, locked away in the secret archives? Some scholars believe so. Then there is the question of authors whose names were erased, not just banned, but deliberately forgotten. Inquisition records speak of books confiscated and burned, authors excommunicated and silenced. Are there texts we no longer know we've lost? Even within the index itself, a certain ambiguity reigns. Titles were sometimes listed without explanation. A reader might see only a name and a date, no context, no rationale. Others were marked with the cryptic phrase Don Corey until corrected. But who decided what correction was acceptable? And how many texts were quietly altered, revised, or republished under different names to escape the list? The index was formally abolished in 1966 by Pope Paul V VI. By then, its authority had been waning for decades, challenged by the rise of modern secularism and freedom of expression. But the idea of the index, its logic, its quiet power has not vanished. The Church still retains the right to judge the spiritual danger of written works. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith continues to review theological publications. While there is no longer an official list, there remains discretion. And perhaps that is the real mystery. The index may be gone, but what of the books themselves? Do they still rest in locked rooms beneath the Vatican Library? Are there entries, drafts not finalised that never reach the public? Is there a hidden index tracking modern works deemed spiritually corrosive, even if not openly named? And what of the spiritual philosophy behind the index? Was it born solely from fear? Or was it in some sense a recognition of the power of the written word? A power so immense that even belief could be undone by a page, a paragraph, a sentence. In the end, we are left with a question not about censorship but about curiosity. Because what we cannot read, we imagine. so we are left to wonder, were the forbidden books suppressed only to preserve doctrine? Or were some silenced because they came too close to something, an idea, a truth, a memory that the Church could not risk becoming common knowledge? And if those pages still exist, bound and hidden, what would they tell us? If we were finally allowed to read from the hushed halls where forbidden books once whispered subversive ideas, we turn now to a question far more familiar, yet perhaps just as enigmatic. A question etched into calendars, celebrated across cultures, and commemorated each year with carols, candles, and quiet reverence. A date accepted by billions, printed on nativity scenes, and lit up on church altars. December the 25th, the birth of Jesus Christ. But was he really born on that day? The Gospels, our primary source for the life of Jesus, speak of angels and shepherds, of a manger in Bethlehem, of a celestial sign seen by wise men in the east. But they are silent on the date, no month, no day, no specific moment preserved. And the earliest Christians, those who lived closest to the time of Jesus, seem to have made no effort to celebrate his birth at all. So where did December 25th come from? The first recorded celebration of Christmas on this date appears in the Roman calendar in 336 AD during the reign of Emperor Constantine. By then, Christianity had emerged from the shadows and taken its place within the imperial structure. Some scholars suggest the Church selected this date to coincide with, or supplant the Roman festival of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun which marked the winter solstice and the rebirth of light. Others note its alignment with Saturnalia, a pagan festival of feasting and gift-giving. Could the date have been chosen not to commemorate a historical moment, but to serve a symbolic purpose? The early Church Fathers debated various possibilities. Clement of Alexandria, writing in the 2nd century, mentioned several proposed dates for Jesus' birth: March 21st, April 15th, May 20th, all based on theological calculations rather than eyewitness testimony. Some tied Jesus' birth to the date of his conception, placing it exactly 9 months after March 25th, the Feast of the Annunciation, thus arriving at December 25th. But even this is circular reasoning based on symbolic symmetry rather than historical evidence. So what do the Gospels offer us? Luke's account describes shepherds watching over their flocks by night, a detail that raises questions. Would shepherds have kept watch outdoors in the cold Judean hills during December? Some scholars argue this suggests a springtime birth, perhaps in March or April. Others point to the appearance of a star seen by the Magi, an event that has inspired centuries of astronomical investigation. Could it have been a comet, a planetary alignment, a supernova? Some researchers believe that a rare conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn occurred in 7 BC, visible from the Middle East and possibly interpreted by ancient astrologers as a sign of royal birth. Others favour 6 BC, a year marked by celestial phenomena recorded in Chinese texts. Still others point to 4 BC based on the likely death date of King Herod, who features prominently in the Nativity narrative. Each theory offers its own logic, but no consensus has ever emerged. Even the year of Jesus' birth is uncertain. Our calendar, divided by the designations BC and A, was established by a 6th century monk named Dionysius Exiguus. His calculations, while monumental in influence, were likely off by several years. Most historians now believe Jesus was born between 6 and 4 BC before the death of Herod the Great. So, if neither the date nor the year is certain, what role has the Vatican played in preserving or shaping our modern understanding? Officially, the Church recognises December 25th as a liturgical celebration, not a fixed historical anniversary. But over time, the institutional emphasis on tradition over investigation has allowed deeper questions to remain in the background. And within the Vatican's archives, where ancient manuscripts, lost calendars, and early theological writings are stored, some believe clues to a more accurate date may exist. Could the true birth date of Jesus be hidden within the pages of forgotten texts preserved by early Christian communities before the rise of centralized authority? Could it be encoded in the writings of Eutychus, Tertullian, or in apocryphal Gospels that were never canonized? There are whispers among scholars that certain early Syrian and Armenian churches held to dates in January or even September, that local traditions diverge sharply from Rome's version, and that over time the pressure to unify practices under a single imperial Christianity swept these variations aside, and then of course there is the symbolic power of the winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. December 25th marks the return of the sun. The longest night gives way to lengthening days. Light overcomes darkness. It is easy to see how early Christians steeped in both theology and metaphor might choose this moment to celebrate the birth of the light of the world. But if that choice was symbolic, what else was shaped by symbol over history? Is it possible that our most cherished traditions, built on nativity scenes, calendars and carols, are anchored not in historical fact, but in centuries of sacred storytelling? And if so, does that make them less meaningful, or perhaps even more? Because at the heart of the mystery is not the date itself, but the desire to remember, to mark time with reverence, to draw a line from the ancient world to our own. Still, the question remains, was Jesus born in a warm spring month beneath clear skies, or in the cold breath of December as tradition tells us? And does the Vatican, keeper of time, text and memory, know more than it shares? So, we are left to wonder, has the true date of Jesus' birth been lost to history? Or does it still lie hidden, waiting in the folds of forgotten parchment, in ancient calendars or coded chronologies, just beyond the reach of those willing to ask, from the uncertain birth date of Christ, etched in calendars yet blurred by history, we now descend into something darker, a mystery not of time, but of presence. A force the Church has never fully explained yet continues to confront in silence. Behind the stone walls of Vatican City, in rooms rarely seen and rituals rarely witnessed, a battle is said to unfold, quiet, ancient, and unsettling. This is the world of exorcisms in the Vatican. It begins in whispers, a voice that shifts, eyes that do not blink, strength beyond what a body should hold. These are the signs, the symptoms passed down not through medical manuals, but through centuries of ritual and belief. The Catholic Church remains one of the few institutions in the modern world to maintain trained, sanctioned exorcists, and while the rite is practiced globally, there is one place where it has never ceased: Rome. The Vatican has long maintained its own chief exorcist. Perhaps the most well-known in recent history was Father Gabriel Amore, who served in this role for over 3 decades. By the time of his death in 2016, Amorth claimed to have performed more than 70,000 exorcisms. Many were brief prayers, others were far more severe. He described voices speaking in ancient languages, individuals who recoiled from holy objects, who convulsed at the sound of the rosary, and who described with eerie clarity the sins of those around them. Amorth was not a fringe figure. He was trained, approved, and protected. He walked Vatican corridors, briefed senior clergy, and advised popes. And yet his work by its nature remained invisible to the faithful, rarely spoken of, almost never seen. Where did these rituals take place? Not in the China Chapel or St. Peter's Basilica, but in small sealed rooms within churches, monasteries, or hidden corners of Vatican buildings. One such chamber is said to exist beneath a Jesuit residence near St. Peter's Square. Another just beyond the reach of the Swiss Guard, tucked away in the Apostolic Palace itself. According to church protocol, an exorcism can only be performed after extensive psychological evaluation. Medical conditions must be ruled out, mental illness must be considered. But when no explanation fits, when the inexplicable remains, the rite may begin. The Ritual Romanum, first formalised in 1614 and revised in 1999, outlines the procedure. Holy water, the crucifix, Latin prayers invoking the authority of Christ to drive out the demon. But even among exorcists, there is a spectrum of belief. Some describe demons as metaphors, spiritual metaphors for deep suffering. Others believe in literal possession, entities that are real, personal, ancient. Is the Vatican's persistence in these rites a quiet admission that there are things science cannot explain? Officially, the Church walks a careful line. It acknowledges demonic possession as rare but real. It trains exorcists discreetly, often through the Pontifical Athenaeum Reginina Apostum, where priests from around the world gather for instruction in both spiritual combat and psychological discernment. But despite this structured approach, deeper mysteries remain. How often are exorcisms actually performed within Vatican walls? What cases are deemed so severe, so troubling that they must be handled within the shadow of the Holy See itself? Some claim that certain exorcisms are classified not because of spectacle, but because of what is said during the ritual, allegations of visions of knowledge that seem impossible, secrets spoken in voices that are not the subject's own, names named, warnings given. There are even stories, uncorroborated but persistent, of possessed individuals uttering information known only to a handful of Vatican officials, of rituals interrupted when a subject recited passages from arcane texts stored deep in the archives. One account whispered among clergy describes a case in which the afflicted spoke fluently in Aramaic, pronouncing ancient liturgical forms no longer used by the Church. Are these embellishments, myths shaped by fear and fascination? Or is there something older at play? Something that even the Vatican, with all its scholarship and control, does not fully understand? The Church has always dealt with paradoxes. The physical and the spiritual, the sacred and the profane, the visible and the hidden. In exorcism, these paradoxes converge. Faith meets suffering, belief meets mystery. And while the Vatican insists the rite is a last resort, not a spectacle, its persistence suggests that even in an age of science and reason, some darkness cannot be explained away. There are also critics, those who say the rite risks reinforcing delusions or worse, masking psychological trauma behind a veil of theology. The Vatican acknowledges these concerns, but still the ritual remains. Why? Perhaps because for all its formality, exorcism serves as a mirror, a reflection of the Church's belief in unseen realities. In spiritual warfare, not metaphorical, but real. And in a world where evil often wears human faces, the rite becomes a strange reassurance that someone somewhere is still confronting the darkness head-on. So we are left to wonder, what has the Vatican seen behind those closed doors? What words have echoed through stone halls during riots that the world will never witness? And if the most sacred city on earth believes in the power of exorcism, what exactly is it trying to keep at bay? From the shadowed rites of exorcism performed in hushed corners of the Holy See, we move now to a different kind of secret operation. One involving not spirits, but soldiers, not ancient prayers, but encoded messages. Beneath the marble corridors and stained glass sanctuaries of Vatican City, another war was waged, one less visible, but no less critical. It was a war of intelligence, of whispers passed between couriers, of secret diplomacy, and of silence weighed carefully in the balance of survival and truth. This is the story of the Vatican's involvement in World War II intelligence. At first glance, Vatican City appears far removed from the theatre of global war. Just 109 acres in size, it is the smallest independent state in the world, neutral by international agreement, unarmed, surrounded by fascist Italy and later Nazi-occupied Rome. And yet in the 1930s and 1940s, it became a quiet epicentre of information, a nerve centre of contacts, messages and hidden decisions. Pope Pius XII, elected in 1939 on the eve of the war, was no stranger to diplomacy. As Cardinal Eugenio Pacelli, he had previously served as the Vatican Secretary of State and Papal Nuncio to Germany. He spoke fluent German and had long-standing relationships with members of the German Catholic hierarchy. When the world descended into chaos, he inherited a church caught between neutrality and moral responsibility, and so the Vatican walked a razor's edge. Officially, it remained neutral throughout the conflict. But beneath that neutrality, a complex web of intelligence activity quietly unfolded. The Vatican's diplomatic corps maintained embassies in more than 40 countries, including Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Through Nuncio, papal ambassadors, and informal contacts with bishops, priests, and lay Catholics, the Vatican had access to an extraordinary network of eyes and ears, even in places where other governments had been shut out. One of the most intriguing questions is just how much the Vatican knew and when. Evidence suggests that by 1942, Pius XII had received detailed reports on the systematic persecution of Jews across Europe. These accounts came through various channels: bishops in occupied Poland, diplomats in Hungary and Slovakia, and perhaps most notably, German resistance figures who risked their lives to pass information to Rome. Did these reports reach the Pope? And if so, what was done with them? Historians remain divided. Some argue that Pius XII's cautious diplomacy allowed him to operate behind the scenes, coordinating rescue efforts, protecting Jews within church institutions, and appealing to Axis leaders through private channels. Others claim his public silence, particularly in the face of the Holocaust, was a moral failure. But lost in the controversy is the deeper mystery, the Vatican's role as an intelligence broker. According to declassified Allied documents, Vatican contacts provided key information on German troop movements, Italian morale, and resistance efforts. Messages were transmitted through Swiss couriers, priests, and even neutral journalists. Some suggest the Vatican passed intelligence to the British through its nature in Baron, while others believe it maintained quiet back channels to the United States via Cardinal Spellman in New York. In 1943, as Nazi forces entered Rome, the Vatican became an island of tense neutrality. German troops surrounded its borders, and yet, reportedly under Hitler's personal orders, no invasion ever occurred. Why? Some believe the Vatican possessed leverage, that its access to sensitive information made it more valuable intact than destroyed, that if the Nazis had stormed its gates, the world would have seen not just an attack on religion, but an attempt to silence one of the war's most quietly informed observers. There are even darker whispers, unproven but persistent, that the Vatican's knowledge of Nazi atrocities extended further than admitted, that it may have used its position to negotiate the post-war survival of certain individuals, that it knew of escape routes later called the rat lines used by former SS officers and collaborators to flee Europe, sometimes with forged Vatican documents or the help of sympathetic clergy. Is this the truth or a convenient conspiracy? What is clear is that the Vatican, though officially neutral, was never uninvolved. It offered sanctuary to thousands during the occupation of Rome, Jews, partisans, political dissidents. It maintained communication with the German resistance. It stored files, conducted quiet diplomacy, and monitored the shifting tides of the war with an intensity known only to the inner circle of the Curia. And yet, many of its archives from this period remain sealed. Despite repeated calls for transparency, the Vatican has only recently begun to open its records on Pius XII and World War II. In 2020, the Apostolic Archives allowed limited access to scholars. Early reports suggest a complex portrait of the Vatican's role, at times heroic, at times hesitant, but full answers remain elusive. What correspondence remains hidden? What names? What decisions? Perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in what the Vatican did, but in what it chose not to say. Silence, after all, can be a form of diplomacy or a form of complicity or both. So we are left to wonder, was the Vatican a passive observer, a secret resistor, or something in between, a keeper of truths too dangerous to reveal even now? And if those truths are still stored within its walls, locked behind wooden doors and iron keys, what might they say about the world's darkest war and the church that watched it unfold from behind veils of incense and shadow? From the coded whispers of wartime intelligence, we now lift our gaze to a different kind of surveillance, one not directed at nations or borders, but toward the cosmos itself. On a mountaintop in southern Arizona, far from the hallowed corridors of Rome, the Vatican maintains a quiet outpost of inquiry, a place where faith meets physics and where the mysteries being pursued are not of men but of stars. This is the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope perched at top Mount Graham. The mountain rises sharply from the desert floor, its slopes covered in thick pine forests and ancient legends. Sacred to the Apache people and remote from major cities, Mount Graham seems an unlikely place for the Vatican to stake a claim. And yet here, 8,550 FT above sea level, stands one of the world's most sophisticated observatories. The Vatican Observatory has existed in various forms since the late 1500s, one of the oldest astronomical institutions in the world. But by the 1980s, light pollution near Rome made meaningful stargazing increasingly difficult. The Church, unwilling to let its legacy of celestial observation fade, looked westward toward clearer skies and darker nights. And in 1993, the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, or VAT, became operational. A modest structure by astronomical standards, it houses a 1.8 reflector capable of capturing extraordinarily sharp images of deep space. It's not the largest telescope in the world, but it's one of the most precise. Run in partnership with the University of Arizona, the observatory is managed by Jesuit astronomers, priests who are also scientists, men of prayer who spend their nights charting galaxies, cataloguing nebulae, and studying the distant glow of ancient suns. But what exactly is the Vatican looking for? Officially, the goals are scientific, studying stellar evolution, galactic structures, and the formation of planetary systems. The Church has long held that faith and reason are not opposites, and its astronomers are vocal about their desire to understand the universe as part of God's creation. They publish in peer-reviewed journals, they attend international conferences. Their work is rigorous, methodical and transparent, and yet questions remain. Because for some, the idea of the Vatican operating a mountaintop observatory thousands of miles from its own territory raises more than academic curiosity. Why Arizona? Why Mount Graham? A site not only remote but steeped in cultural and ecological controversy. The construction of the observatory faced years of protest from Native American tribes who regard the mountain as sacred, and from environmentalists concerned about endangered species. The Vatican, known for its sensitivity to human dignity, pressed forward. Was it simply the quality of the night sky, or something more? Some point to the mountain's position and atmospheric stability, ideal for deep sky observation. Others note its proximity to the Large Binocular Telescope and a neighbouring infrared instrument known by the acronym LUCI, once nicknamed Lucifer, a coincidence that has fueled countless online theories despite being unrelated to the Vatican's own facility. Still, the association lingers. Some speculate that the Church's astronomers are searching for signs of extraterrestrial life. In 2009, Father José Gabriel Funes, then director of the Vatican Observatory, famously stated that belief in alien life does not contradict our faith. He even suggested that intelligent extraterrestrials would be part of God's creation, potentially sinless and in no need of salvation. It was a bold theological statement, but it also felt prepared. Could it be that the Vatican's astronomers have seen something, detected anomalies in the data, unusual signatures? Or are they simply preparing the Church quietly, slowly for a future where we are not alone? Other theories take a different path. Some claim the Church is using Mount Graham to track something not of this world, but approaching it. A celestial body, an unknown planet, a hidden comet, a recurring object linked to ancient prophecies. These claims are often dismissed by scientists, but the secrecy surrounding certain Vatican research projects has only added fuel to the fire. What's more, access to the observatory is limited. Public visits are rare, and the daily activities of the Vatican's astronomers remain largely outside media coverage. This is not unusual for scientific facilities, but in the case of the Vatican, whose reach is both spiritual and global, even a little silence invites questions. And then there are the stories, accounts from former observatory employees, unverified but persistent, of unusual data logged late at night. Lights in the sky that moved against known celestial patterns, records quietly deleted, conversations interrupted when they crossed certain lines. Are these just fabrications or faint echoes of something more? Despite all this, the Vatican has never suggested that its astronomers are engaged in anything other than scientific research. Their publications reflect this. Their language remains grounded. But the history of the Church is a history of dualities, of things said and things unsaid, of sacred truths revealed only when the world is ready to hear them. And perhaps that is the role of Mount Graham, not to look for something new, but to prepare for the moment when something long foreseen becomes visible. So, we are left to wonder, is the Vatican's telescope on Mount Graham simply another scientific instrument? Or is it a sentinel? Is it there to map the stars or to watch for something else? Something approaching in silence from the dark beyond the veil of space? And if so, what are they waiting to see? From the clear Arizona sky above Mount Graham, where the Vatican peers into deep space in search of cosmic truths, we now descend once more into the shadows of the Earth. Not to a mountain, but to an archive. Not under starlight, but beneath stone. Deep within the walls of Vatican City lies a place that few have ever entered. A place where ink, not fire, preserves the echoes of one of the most feared institutions in church history. This is the realm of the Inquisition files. To enter the Vatican Apostolic Archive, formerly known as the Secret Archive, is to step into centuries of silence, endless shelves, faded manuscripts, fragile scrolls bound with twine, and among them, sealed in protective cases, are the records of the Roman Inquisition, the files of interrogations, confessions, accusations, and judgments passed down during some of the darkest chapters in ecclesiastical history. These are not myths, they exist. Established formally in 1542 under Pope Paul III, The Roman Inquisition was designed to root out heresy, preserve doctrinal purity, and protect the authority of the Church, but its legacy would be written in fear through whispered denunciations, secret tribunals, and the quiet turning of keys behind locked doors. The files are vast, meticulous, painfully detailed. Thousands of pages handwritten in Latin or Italian document cases that range from minor theological errors to grand-scale accusations of witchcraft, sorcery, apostasy, and heresy. Some names are well known: Galileo Galilei, Giordano Bruno, and other intellectuals whose ideas tested the boundaries of sanctioned belief. Others are anonymous midwives, farmers, booksellers, and monks whose lives were altered, sometimes ended by a sentence written in ink. But what else lies within these documents? What has not yet been revealed? For centuries, the Inquisition files were closed, accessible only to a select group of ecclesiastical scholars under strict oversight. It was not until 1998 that Pope John Paul II opened portions of the archive to outside researchers, a monumental gesture toward transparency. Since then, historians have begun to sift through the texts, translating and interpreting the labyrinth of testimony and decree, but the process is slow, painstaking, and far from complete. Some files remain restricted, others are known to exist but have yet to be made available. Officially, this is due to the fragility of the documents or concerns over privacy. But some believe there are deeper reasons. What if certain cases within the Inquisition's records contain theological theories that were suppressed not just for heresy, but because they were dangerously persuasive? What if long-forgotten mystics or visionaries whose names never made it into history books spoke of revelations or events that mirrored modern ideas, prophecies, lost gospels, alternate readings of scripture? Could the Inquisition have quietly buried knowledge too dangerous to let survive? There are scattered clues. Some texts reference books that no longer exist, seditious manuscripts, or unapproved translations destroyed at the time, but perhaps copied or hidden. Others mention visions, celestial signs, or contacts with beings of light, interpreted in their time as demonic, but which through a modern lens raise different kinds of questions. And then there is the lingering speculation around secret rituals. Some accused individuals, particularly during the height of witchcraft hysteria, were charged not with harming others, but with possessing forbidden knowledge, insights into natural forces, healing practices, or cosmological frameworks that ran counter to church teaching. Was this merely superstition? Or did the church see in these individuals echoes of ancient belief systems it feared would return? Among the most mysterious cases are those that remain unsolved, not because guilt was unproven, but because the trial was never completed. The accused vanished. Records end abruptly. Some were transferred to different jurisdictions. Others disappeared entirely. Were they released in secret, silenced, or perhaps, if one dares to wonder, protected? What makes the Inquisition files so unique is not just their content, but the way they reveal the machinery of control, spiritual, intellectual, and institutional. They show how belief was measured, judged, and often punished, but they also expose the cracks in the system, the doubts, the confessions made under duress, the testimonies that contradict each other, the moments when even the inquisitors hesitated. There is in this archive a human story, one that is fragile, complex, and deeply haunting. But there is also a sense among those who have studied these documents that something remains unrevealed. Some believe there may be a classified subset of Inquisition materials, files moved from the general archive into a more restricted section. This theory is supported by inconsistencies in catalogue records, by missing folios, and by references in other documents to trials that cannot be found. If such a cache exists, it would likely be known only to a handful of high-ranking officials within the congregation for the doctrine of the faith, the modern successor to the Inquisition. What might those files contain? Accounts of phenomena never explained, encounters with strange apparitions, testimonies involving ancient artifacts, or perhaps the written confessions of those who stumbled too close to truths the Church was not ready to face. Or perhaps they contain nothing unusual at all, just the routine record-keeping of a bureaucracy that once believed it could police the boundaries of the soul. But the mystery remains. In a church that has long guarded secrets, the Inquisition files stand as a testament to a different kind of knowledge, one born of fear, silence and shadows. So we are left to wonder what truths remain buried in those aging pages. What forgotten voices still cry out from behind red wax seals and brittle parchment? And if the full archive were ever opened without restriction, without redaction, what might we find in the final lines of those ancient judgments? Something long hidden or something we've always suspected? From the echoing silence of the Inquisition files, where secrets of faith and fear remain sealed in ink. We turn now to one of the most dramatic and enduring enigmas in church history, a tale that spans crusades, crowns and cathedrals, a rise fueled by faith and fortune, a fall shrouded in betrayal and secrecy, the story of the Knight Templar. Imagine a fortress monastery high on a limestone bluff in the Levant. Beneath the blazing sun, armoured figures kneel in disciplined silence. Their white mantles bear a red cross, a symbol of divine duty and martial power. These were not monks, not in the traditional sense, nor were they simply soldiers. The Templars were something else entirely, an order created to guard pilgrims, but which soon became guardians of something much greater: knowledge, wealth, and influence. Founded in 1119 in the aftermath of the First Crusade, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon began with humble intentions. Just 9 men, no wealth, no grand architecture. Yet within decades, the Templars had become one of the most powerful organisations in Christendom. They answered only to the Pope. They owned land across Europe and the Holy Land. They established early forms of banking, developed fortified outposts, and commanded fleets of ships. How did a band of warrior monks rise so fast? The Church granted them extraordinary privileges. They could collect taxes, bypass local bishops, travel freely across borders, and perhaps most notably, they were given the Temple Mount in Jerusalem as their headquarters, a location already steeped in millennia of sacred tradition. It was here in the ruins believed to stand upon the ancient site of Solomon's Temple that the Templars dug. And here the mystery deepens. Historical records are vague about what they found, if anything, but legends persist. Some claim the Templars unearthed sacred relics, the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, or ancient scrolls predating even the Gospels. Others believe they discovered lost knowledge, esoteric teachings preserved from pre-Christian sects or early Judaic mysticism. Whether treasure or text, the implications were profound and, if true, perhaps dangerous. By the mid-13th century, the Templars were no longer merely crusaders. They were financiers, advisors to kings, and builders of massive stone churches whose designs some claim contain hidden codes, numerology, and sacred geometry. Their rituals became more private, their influence increasingly opaque, and then it ended suddenly. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, a date that still echoes with superstition, King Philip IV of France ordered the arrest of every Templar in his kingdom. Charges were sweeping: heresy, idol worship, financial corruption, unnatural acts. The accusations were shocking. The confessions extracted under torture were contradictory. Some claim they spat on the cross during initiation rituals. Others mentioned the worship of a severed head or a mysterious figure named Baphomet. Was any of it true, or was it orchestrated? Philip owed the Templars immense debts. His kingdom was financially strained, and their power had grown uncomfortable. By removing them, he not only eliminated a rival, but seized their assets. The Pope at the time, Clement V, a Frenchman under Philip's influence, did little to protect the order. Despite papal inquiries suggesting the Templars were largely innocent, the damage was done. In 1312, the Pope officially dissolved the order. In 1314, the Grand Master Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake, famously recanting his confession and calling down judgment on his accusers as flames consumed him. But the Templars did not vanish into smoke. Their lands were transferred on paper to the Knights Hospitaller, but many of their records disappeared. So too did much of their treasure, and perhaps something else, something intangible. Rumours spread of surviving Templars fleeing to Scotland, Portugal, or the Holy Roman Empire. Some believe they went underground, forming secret societies that would resurface centuries later in the symbols of Freemasonry or other esoteric orders. Others argue that what they discovered beneath the Temple Mount was never lost again, that it was passed down, protected, hidden by a chain of guardians whose identities remain unknown. The Vatican's role in the fall of the Templars remains murky. While Pope Clement V ultimately dissolved the order, Recent releases from Vatican Archives, including the Shinhan parchment discovered in 2001, suggest the Church may have absolved the Templars in secret, even as it allowed their destruction in public. Why was it political cowardice or something else? A deeper fear of what the Templars might have preserved, whispered, or believed. The question lingers if the Templars truly had access to forbidden knowledge, texts from beneath the temple, relics that could reshape doctrine or insight into spiritual truths the Church wasn't ready to confront. What happened to it after their fall? Was it destroyed or hidden, waiting for the world to be ready? To this day, symbols associated with the Templars remain inscribed in forgotten chapels and carved into medieval tombs. Their legends live on in fiction and conspiracy alike. But beneath the romance and speculation, one truth persists. No other institution in medieval Europe rose so far, so fast only to vanish in such orchestrated silence. So we are left to wonder, were the Templars undone by greed, politics and paranoia? Or did they vanish because they came too close to a truth that challenged the very foundation of power? And if that truth still exists, has the Vatican already seen it? Or is it still buried somewhere beneath the stones of an ancient temple guarded not by knights, but by time itself?